Pandemic World Online is a fighting MMO game in which a huge number of large-scale battles take place. And in this game, Kisaragi Toya is the strongest berserker in history, who has seen many wars. He was a berserker, but now he's a magician in another world. Here he belongs to the Henrietta Kingdom, and they stand face to face with the Luneta Kingdom. And the Sifansi Kingdom sends mercenaries to both kingdoms as support for the war. Every night these three countries fight for control of the lands in an endless war. The maximum level in the game is 999th, but only 0.1% of the players reach the 500th. And Kisaragi Toya with the 700th level is one of them. He becomes even stronger, glorifying his name everywhere. He's a berserker who uses Buster's sword. After the victory in the duel, the guys gathered in a tavern on the central square. They happily congratulated each other on their victory. The guys gathered at the table to celebrate and drink beer, because today the enemy was formidable. But thanks to Toya, they were able to win. The guy in the mask waved his hands in embarrassment and said that they had won only thanks to everyone's efforts. The guys at the table laughingly asked what had become of his merciless berserker personality, because when they fought, Kisaragi Toya was very dangerous. But despite this, they are very happy to have someone with level 700 as an ally. If we consider the level of the guy, we can say that he spent many nights without sleep to achieve such results. He put a lot of effort into achieving this. In the middle of the conversation, an offer to go monster hunting slipped through. Someone agreed and suggested Lolarak Cave as a place. However, Kisaragi Toya said he would like to sort things out first. Today's reward appeared in front of him, the maid's robe, a rather useless thing for a berserker. The guy told the others to wait a bit because he decided to log in. He pressed the exit button and then joined back. Another character appeared. He was immediately asked about the fact that he had created a magician's account. Kisaragi Toya answered in the affirmative, and then, taking the awards, explained that he had accumulated a lot of things for the magician. After all, since he can't use them with his Berserk account, he created this one to store items. The guy uses this account only as a storage of things that he doesn't need. In the opinion of other players, it was wasteful, but even so, the guy put a lot of effort into the design of this character. He was called to hunt again, but he said that it would be very difficult, since this account is the first level. He asked the others to wait until he logged into the Berserker account. But before he could get out, a magic circle appeared under his feet. Everyone was watching in shock and trying to figure out what was going on. Kisaragi Toya suggested that this was some kind of bug. There was an explosion and a girl appeared in front of my eyes. The guy was sitting on the floor, and strangers were standing in front of him. In the center was an elderly man who looked like a church minister and a girl. They shouted what happened. Someone said that, as expected, they succeeded on the first attempt. Kisaragi Toya was sitting in a circle on the floor and did not understand what was going on. He realized that he could not see the monitor, so he immediately asked where he was. The girl grabbed him and began to hug him, calling him a hero, as well as the fact that they were waiting for him. She suddenly let him go and apologized, as she was excited and did it without thinking. The guy awkwardly looked away and said that everything was fine. The girl bowed politely and apologized for not introducing herself at first. She is the first princess of the Henrietta Kingdom, and her name is Sharon von Henrietta. She said she was very pleased to meet the guy. She turned to him with a request to lend them her power. Their kingdom is at war with the kingdom of Luneta, and countless lives and lands have been taken from them. The opponents even killed women and children, so then they decided to use the power of their national treasure, the Pearl of the Call, thereby calling the hero to their lands. Kisaragi Toya thought that they are not in the game in the novel, so it doesn't make sense. He replied to the princess that even if she was talking about it, he was an ordinary employee of 30 years. To this statement, Sharon replied that he seemed very young to her. The guy asked her about it and pointed to his platinum-colored hair. And then, realizing that he had platinum hair, he opened his raincoat and looked at his torso. He asked in shock what kind of hot body it was. The knight of the princess began to swear at him because the guy behaves indecently in front of the princess, but she stopped him and turned to the guy. Sharon explained that it was quite normal that he was at a loss right now. She asked the guy to check his status, as this would be proof that he is a hero. A virtual window with information about him appeared in front of Toya. His name is Kisaragi Toya. He is of the human race, male, he is 16 years old, a magician by profession, and his title is called the One Who is Called. He has the first level, there are no abilities, as well as magic, and a special ability is an assessment. He can use magic of all attributes and use spatial storage. The guy was surprised by such a window, because it's just like in the game, but there was no word hero anywhere. Sharon asked him about his title, to which he replied that the One Who is Called. They say that those who have been called have a high level, so his expectations should be higher than the 100th. But the guy replied that level 1. There was indignation in the crowd, since this is the level of a newborn. How could this happen? These people seemed pretty angry, so the guy replied in confusion that apparently they had called the wrong one, so they should bring him back. The knight next to the princess got angry again, because at a moment like this, he behaves like this. Sharon stopped him again. She replied that the summoning pearl has an analog, which is the reverse summoning pearl. That means they'll be able to send him back. But first she needs to perform the summoning ceremony again. It can only be performed once every few years on a full moon, and she can only create one spell with the magic power she currently has. Kisaragi Toya asked that he could then hold a callback ceremony tomorrow if the princess so desired. She thanked him for his understanding. In that case, she offered to use the summoning pearl again. The guy was rudely chased out of the circle. An old church minister gave the princess a potion to restore her magical power. She drank the potion and began to summon. This time the light was much brighter when suddenly the summoning pearl broke. A young man in armor appeared in the circle, who asked with incomprehension about what had happened to him. He was fighting a monster, and then suddenly he was here. Sharon ran up to him and, grabbing his hands, asked him to tell her his title. The guy checked with bewilderment and called himself a sacred knight and hero. People around began to rejoice at what happened, because now their kingdom is saved. The princess rushed into the arms of the hero with the words that she had been waiting for him for so long. She was called because the king is waiting for a hero. Kisaragi Toya found himself in a room that clearly does not look like a guest room. The maid through the door said she had left his dinner on the table. The guy lifted the lid of the tray, and there was a piece of bread and an empty soup on it. Toya went to the mirror and examined himself. He assumed that this was a magician he had created. He fell on the bed with thoughts about why he was here. After some time, he ate the food that was left for him, but his stomach still continued to rumble from hunger. Because of this, he couldn't even sleep if only he had food. He suddenly thought of trying to open the vault. The guy stretched out his hand forward, but nothing happened, when suddenly his spatial storage still opened. There were a huge number of different items in it, because he threw everything he didn't use into the vault. While Kisaragi was looking through the items, that elderly man entered the room. He informed the guest from another world that it was time to start the callback ceremony. They were accompanied by knights, and the man explained that the princess was busy right now, so he would be the one to conduct the ceremony. He is a court magician, so there is nothing to worry about. The guy was looking around and noticed Sharon in the yard with the newly arrived hero. Finally, he will be able to return home. He has a lot of work to do tomorrow. They came to the hall, where the guy stood in a circle again. The man began to recite a spell, and the guy thought that he would be able to continue his daily life. He is sure that later he will perceive it as a simple dream. He began to gradually lose consciousness while the man was reciting the spell. Kisaragi Toya woke up somewhere in nature in the same guise. He thought it must be a joke. He sat on the grass and thought that it turns out he will not be able to return to his world. And what should he do now? The guy was somewhere in nature. He examined his appearance, sat down on a rock and thought about how he would continue to live. He went to work before he came to Henrietta Kingdom, and he didn't have any relatives left in that world, so he doesn't have anyone to worry about. His thoughts were interrupted by a rumbling stomach. Even at such moments he is still hungry. He remembered about the spatial storage and immediately opened it. There were 99 units of bread in it, so he immediately used one. A piece of bread appeared in the air, and the guy deftly caught it. He ate, still sitting on the rock. The number of bread in the vault decreased when he took it out. Kisaragi Toya stood up, as he was still thinking about how he should live now, so he decided to check the vault first. He had a lot of weapons and things that he once used in the game. Apart from them, there were also many more different items. He found a helmet and shield that cost a fortune, as well as his very first buster sword that he used. He swung it and hit the tree, but it didn't even move. The guy concentrated and an hour later he was already good at controlling it, which means that he can use it, even being a magician. Kisaragi decided that first he had to get to a village or a city. He had an idea that there might be something suitable in the vault. In the game, he used a horse until he reached the 100th level, and after getting a better vehicle, the guy moved it to the storage. The magician decided to try to get a horse. A bright flash appeared in front of him, and then a big horse appeared. She laughed loudly and began to lick the guy's head like he was some kind of yummy. He wiped his head and turned to the horse with the words that he would like to go to some populated place and asked for a ride. The horse sat down so that the guy could climb on it, and they set off. Kisaragi Toya thought that from this moment he begins his life in this world. The steed sped up so sharply that the guy could barely hold on. They reached the wagon, which was attacked by goblins. It all looks like a template battle, and Kisaragi did not know if he could help them, since he is only a first-level magician. He turned to the horse with a question about whether she could help him, as she suddenly began to shred goblins on her own, so the guy could only hold on tighter. And after some time, all the enemies were defeated. The people at the cart were quite wary, because it looked like they were scared of the horse, so Kisaragi got off her and apologized. The knight who was there thanked the guy for his help and was surprised at how skillfully the magician rides a war horse. The young man tried to explain that the horse did everything himself, but it seems that the animal became very attached to him, as it began to chew his head again. At the request of the Adventurers Guild, these guys accompanied the merchant's cart. It's all very similar to some story of rebirth that he read in a novella. The people accompanying the cart were very happy that they were rescued. They offered to go to the city together, to which Toya immediately reacted, as it would help him a lot. The knight said that there is a guild in the city where a guy can get a certificate of conquest. But the young man had no idea what it was, so the knight kindly said that this certificate, in fact, proves that you defeated the monster. Also, if he goes to the guild, he can get money. A goblin has this right ear, since a low-class monster doesn't have a magic stone. The guys began to cut off the right ears of the stricken goblins, so the guy also wanted to do it, but he was stopped because they wanted to repay him for saving him in this way. Kisaragi Toya thanked them for this with a smile. The guy told them that he had lost his memory, so he couldn't explain how he got there. They were sitting around the campfire and he was offered to register with the Adventurers Guild. Then he would receive the title of an adventurer. If he wants to live in this world, then he should think about it. The knight also said that if the guy becomes a member of the guild, he will be able to conclude a contract of submission. They use magical tools to make a contract between master and servant, but the one who concludes it must be recognized as a monster. It's rare to have a warhorse on hand, and even many high-ranking adventurers don't own them. Kisaragi was replaced as a watchman, so he went to rest. Sitting with his horse, the guy asked her a question about whether she recognizes him as her master. They finally arrived at the place. This is the city of Fandi. It is quite lively and there are a lot of people walking around the kiosks, and there are even beastmen here. Now Toya felt that he was in another world. They said goodbye to the guys, and they offered to have a drink together when he finished his business. The guy gathered his thoughts and decided that from now on he would become an adventurer, so he went to the guild of the city. He entered the building, but his horse was following him. But she shouldn't have gone in there, so he pushed her out and told her to wait outside and not go anywhere. He finally entered the room and sighed in surprise, because there were a variety of people there and not only. Kisaragi Toya came up to the counter and said he wanted to register as an adventurer, and would also like to sign a submission contract with a horse. The girl politely replied to the newcomer that the horses did not need this contract, to which he clarified that she was fighting. The girl exclaimed loudly and said that it was a B-rank monster, so he needed to register her. She enthusiastically said that she would like to see a war horse, and handed him a form to fill out. Kisaragi took the paper in his hands and was surprised, as he was able to read these letters. Also, when he wrote ordinary letters, they changed to the letters of this world. It remains to register a guild card for him. For this, his finger was pierced so that he touched the ball with a drop of blood. Immediately after that, he was given his card, as well as an identity card, which he was asked not to lose. The girl explained that when he holds her close to his body, she automatically absorbs his magical power and calls up his registration information. He put it to his chest, and the information really appeared. He can also perform tasks one level above his level in the guild. In the case of Kisaragi, these are E-rank tasks, since he has F. Some items were brought to him. And the girl said that for the contract of submission, the owner must wear this bracelet, and he puts the necklace on the monster with his consent, then the contract can be considered concluded. This is a certificate of the servant's identity, which other people perceive as a contract. She asked if he had any more questions, to which the young man asked about a place where he could leave his horse. The girl said not to worry about it and started looking for a suitable place. The guy thanked her for her help. The girl suddenly remembered that she had forgotten to introduce herself. She apologized and gave her name, Milia. She asked with a smile about his war horse, when suddenly the door behind him abruptly opened. The guy, wrapped in a rope, was lying on the floor. Someone shouted that the huge horse was mad. Toya tried to calm her down, but she continued to run amok. The guild people told him to get rid of her. Kisaragi Toya shouted to the horse to calm down, otherwise he would not take her with him. The horse immediately calmed down. The man behind the counter of a small kiosk said it was the fault of those guys. He asked about the fact that his horse is quite rare, because when those guys tied a rope around him and tried to take him away, he freaked out. The horse just didn't want to be separated from its owner, that's all. The man said that this is the daily life of adventurers, and he does not feel sorry for them, because they are to blame. He treated the guy to a special meat of the city of Fandi to cheer him up. There were many cases when servants without a certificate were stolen in broad daylight. Kisaragi Toya and his war horse were sitting by the river and eating shish kebab, and the guy was thinking that don't horses eat grass. He asked his mount about the fact that he was alone in his vault all this time. The guy was sitting and talking about how the horse is his first friend in this world and it would be a problem if he disappeared. He held out his hand with the necklace and asked permission to put it on as proof that he was a servant. The horse looked at him and calmly lowered his head. Kisaragi said he had to call him something. The name Obsidian or Kokyu came to mind in their language, because he is just as black. He asked him to take care of himself, and the horse in response began to chew his head again. A girl who was eating something was watching everything that was happening. She noticed the war horse, as well as how she was attached to this guy. In her opinion, they seemed strange to her. Such girls are called Lola, but she is older than your grandmother. Kisaragi Toya decided to temporarily settle in a hotel called Foxtail Rest, which the guild advised him. This place is run by the parents and children of beastmen, and it is famous for its cooking, and especially for the stew of orcs. A hotel employee came to the guy's room with lunch, but she noticed that the young man was still sleeping, as she smiled and said that he must be very tired. Toya finally woke up. He slept so well after a long time. He went out into the yard, where Kokyu was standing in the pen. The horse, as usual, began to chew the guy's head, and he was surprised that even in such a situation, he was sleeping so soundly. The guy thought that, whatever it was, he needed to learn more about this world. Kisaragi Toya discovered that he could buy anything in this world for in-game currency, so he came to the hotel with a bag of money to settle for 10 days. However, they told him there that it was too much, so he came to the conclusion that he did not know the value of the money he had. He needs to study economics in the city. Toya got ready and informed the worker that he would leave for a while, and thanked her for her help in caring for the horse. She also told him to come back early, as there would be orc stew for dinner tonight. In an attempt to find out the value of money while walking around the market, Kisaragi Toya realized that he didn't seem to need to worry about money. He noticed a gun store where he immediately went. He picked up a sword and thought that in fantasy worlds there should always be a weapon. However, he needs a weapon of a higher rank than what he has. The blacksmith said that if the guy is a magician, then it would be better for him to visit the magic tools store. Kisaragi Toya enthusiastically asked if there were magic books there, since he did not use magic in the game. He decided to go and see. The seller said that a shop called Twilight Pavilion should be on one of these streets, and he also said that the seller here is a little strange. Kisaragi entered the store and saw a doll sitting on a chair, but she suddenly opened her eyes. It turns out that this is an elf, as well as the same Lola who watched the guy with the horse when they were at the river. She said she remembered him, smiled and stood up. To the bewilderment of the guy, she said that it was not important and asked what he was looking for. Kisaragi Toya thought that the owner is a little girl. As his thoughts were interrupted by the words of the elf, she warned that she was much older than a man like him. And even if she looks like that, she's still a full-fledged adult girl. The guy laughed awkwardly, because his expression immediately gave him away. He said he is looking for magic books since he is a novice adventurer, but he doesn't know how to use magic. The elf went to the bookshelf and began to take out a few, simultaneously explaining which one costs how much. The price of books for novice magicians is 10 silver coins. A book of a medium-level magician costs 50 silver coins, and 2 gold coins for a book for high-level ones. She explained that if he is a beginner, then it is worth starting with a beginner's book, since it contains various spells for everyday life. Walking around the city, Kisaragi Toya has already found out the value of his money. 1 copper coin is 100 yen, 1 silver coin is 10,000 yen, and 1 gold coin is worth 1 million yen. He wondered if it was worth buying them. After all, it seems to be expensive. But the guy decided to buy all 3. The elf said with a smile that he was unusually special, even though he was still so young. She asked what his name was, and after the guy introduced himself, she asked about the payment. Toya took out the coins, and the girl was surprised that he knew how to use the vault. Because of this, Kisaragi Toya asked her if he was careless when using it in public. She replied that there was no need to be so careful, even though it was a rare skill. But since he had used it, then she could do it now. The guy relaxed, because she also knows how to use it. The girl added with a confident look that even if it is the same storage skill, her skill is called the Twilight Sage Storage Natalia, in which you can store up to 5,000 kilograms. Kisaragi Toya thought about it. No matter how he thought about it, her storage wouldn't be able to match his. In short, his storage has long exceeded the limit of the number of items he can store there. He looked at the smug girl and decided it was better to keep it a secret. The elf asked if he needed anything else, to which the guy replied in the negative, since it was time for him to go home. The girl replied that if he needed something else, he could come at any time, because, in her opinion, he had good potential as a magician, so she would teach him step by step, of course, for a certain price. Toya smiled awkwardly and left. He returned to the hotel and began to study the book for beginners. Attacking, recovery and support magic was recorded and classified in it. He has to learn how to use recovery magic at a certain level. The guy noticed something strange. The spells are imprinted on their own in his mind. After a while, he thought that he already felt like he could use some high-level spells. The guy decided to try healing, and his magic power burst out. The next morning, the hotel staff discussed the fact that something was glowing at night. Not everyone noticed it, but for some reason their bodies were in excellent condition. Closer to lunch, Kisaragi Toya came out, yawning widely. The employee said she was worried because he didn't come to dinner yesterday, to which the guy replied that he was a little tired, so he immediately went to bed. She went to make him breakfast, and after a while brought food. The girl told him to eat more because he hadn't eaten anything yesterday. Kisaragi Toya was still feeling tired, but after he tasted the food, he brightened up, as the food turned out to be very tasty. The girl replied that it was because there was a lot of orc meat in it. The guy finished his meal, folded his palms in front of him and thanked him for the food. The employee asked about this gesture because it looked strange. She assumed it was some kind of gratitude for the food from his hometown. Toya agreed, but he thought that because it was a habit, nothing could be done about it. He went up to his room and lay down on the bed. The guy wondered if he could return to his world or if he could stay here for the rest of his life. Of course, the Henrietta Kingdom is also a country within the game, but this place is called the City of the Kingdom of Sarandi, Fandi, and he had never heard of such a thing. The young man doesn't even know if it's the same world as in the game or not, or if it's a different place altogether. What he is sure of is that he can use the storage. Kisaragi Toya waved his hand and a ring appeared, which is an auxiliary element for beginners, but it has the ridiculous effect that experience points are multiplied 100 times. It was given out to balance other players with high-level ones. In any case, the guy has to become stronger. Kisaragi Toya went to the forest south of the city of Fendi. He brought Kokyu with him and asked him to wait until he checked something. The guy went to the drinking trough to pour water for the horse with the help of everyday magic. Water appeared out of the air, which filled the tank. The horse came up and started drinking. The guy noticed that the horse was still pretty smart. He was told that there are no strong monsters in this place, but it's still different from the game, so he needs to be careful. He picked up the weapon and went on. There are a lot of monsters living in the forest, so it didn't take him long to find a few. The problem is, he was just an office worker. Would he be able to kill them? Kisaragi Toya was sitting in ambush behind a tree not far from the goblins. He hesitated a little, but still came out of ambush and attacked, deftly swinging his sword. The guy quickly dealt with a bunch of goblins, after which he immediately checked his status. He was very surprised because he raised 6 levels at a time, which means that the ring effect works. Now that Kisaragi Toya found out, he went to deal with all the small monsters along the way. After a while, he decided that it was time to return to Kokuya, and he put the defeated monsters in his storage. The guy somehow got out of the woods, where he saw his horse. Kokyu stood among the defeated goblins. The guy exclaimed and asked if the horse had coped by himself. As expected from a war horse, the young man counted about 30 corpses, after which he took care of them, putting them in storage. Kokyu was all sticky because of the blood, so Toya said that when he arrived he would wash him with magic. They returned to the city and went to the guild, where Milia, taking the loot, asked in shock how many monsters the guy had killed in one day. The young man awkwardly scratched his head and said that he was just carried away. He also added that there were still a bunch of orcs in the vault, but then the girl interrupted him and asked him to wait. Milia, under the sidelong glances of other adventurers, whispered to the guy that she would take him to the storage room at the back of the building. When they left, she explained that he should still keep it a secret that he could use the vault. All because it's a skill that many people desperately want to get their hands on. Other teams will try to recruit him if they find out about it. After this clarification, he thought it would be very troublesome. The man in the warehouse, when he saw the girl, immediately asked if she had brought them any materials. Then he turned his attention to the guy next to her and assumed that he was the one who brought the materials. The guy introduced himself as Dalek. He manages everything here. Kisaragi Toya introduced himself in response, and Dalek said that he had not heard of him, so the guy was a beginner. He asked where the materials were. Kisaragi thought it was okay if he told him, so he replied that they were in his vault. The warehouse manager was slightly surprised that the young man could use it and pointed to the countertop with the words that he could put everything on them. Toya hesitated and said that there were quite a lot of them. Dalek slapped him on the back and said they were professionals, so he shouldn't worry, they wouldn't judge him since he was a beginner. Kisaragi Toya waved his hand and began to spread out the materials. 200 goblin ears, 10 orc bodies, 10 wolves, 20, 30. The manager strained more and more with each new material. At some point, he shouted for the guy to stop. At this stage, the materials filled half of the warehouse. Dalek was caught, so he said they would do it for now, and the materials in the storage should not rot. However, he said that if it happens every time, it's not very good. Kisaragi Toya waved his hand and replied that he was not going to hunt in the near future. The manager suggested that the kid must be high-ranked, to which Milia replied that he had only recently become E-ranked. Toya explained that because of the goblin ears that others had collected for him, his level had risen. Dalek listened to all this and slapped the magician on the back again and said that an amazing newcomer had appeared in the guild. After they returned back to the registration, the girl informed that the evaluation of the material would be tomorrow afternoon, as well as that he would most likely rise in rank. Because if the Toya is E rank, then the balance will be a little strange. The guy left it up to them. Milia asked him about his mage specialization because she couldn't believe it when he brought so many materials. She even had the idea that he was a berserker or something like that. As soon as the magician heard these words, he immediately asked if there was a berserker job. An invincible berserker who kills all his enemies he encounters on the battlefield. Someone who goes beyond a warrior, something that no one can achieve. The girl explained that in the end, it's just a legend, since they say that the 100th level is the limit. Later, the guy wondered if it could be that no one knows that you can change your work to achieve the 100th level. And is it even possible in this world to change jobs like in a game? However, with the effect of this ring, it is quite real, because at one time he rose to the 35th level. If he works hard, then this achievement will not be just a dream. The guy came to the decision that he was going to become a berserker in this world. He stroked the horse's head and asked if it would be next to him. Kokyu in response began to chew the guy's head, which he took for a positive answer. In this case, he needs to become stronger. They went back to the hotel with high spirits. As soon as they approached her, the owners of the Foxtail Rest apologized and asked the guy to leave the hotel tomorrow morning. The next day, Kisaragi Toya went to the guild, where he told about what had happened at the hotel. Milia was shocked that the guy was being kicked out. He explained that it was because Kokyu was scaring the other horses. Some of the guests had left because of it. For this reason, he asked the girl to find him another hotel. However, if this goes on, the same thing will happen. Therefore, the girl offered the young man to rent a mansion. Kisaragi Toya said it must be expensive. Milia said that there is also cheap real estate. But there is also a special condition. In addition, the owner is a little strange. They went to the owner of the building, who turned out to be Natalia from the store. She greeted the lady from the guild, and Milia said that they would like to talk about the mansion. The elf stretched lazily, since people never learn from mistakes, and then asked who the client was. Kisaragi Toya entered the building, and Natalia immediately recognized him. Milia was a little surprised that they knew each other, to which the guy said that he came here for shopping. The hostess listened to his story, and they went to the mansion. On the way, many people stared at them, because it's not every day you meet a war horse, so he is also much bigger than an ordinary horse. They came to some elite area, so Natalia's mansion is located in such a place. They approached the building and Kisaragi Toya was shocked, as the mansion is too luxurious. Natalia said that if he rents it, then you shouldn't worry about it, because it depends on the guy whether he can live in it or not. The young man sighed in bewilderment at such words. The elf stood on the threshold and called Ferris. Because of this, the magician thought that there were people inside, but he saw something strange coming down the stairs. Suddenly, a girl appeared out of thin air, who is the spirit of this mansion, in which only the one she recognizes can live. Natalia greeted her, and Kisaragi tried to figure out where she came from. Although this girl is beautiful, but her expression is completely empty, as if she were a doll. The guy asked Natalia about her words about the spirit of the mansion. He thought it was something like a ghost. Milia explained that the spirit of the mansion, as its name says, dwells in the mansion. This is the one who protects the house and brings good luck. However, the house spirit chooses who will live in the house. Even Natalia, being the owner, will not be able to live in it if she is not recognized. Kisaragi Toya asked how he could get a confession, to which the elf simply asked Ferris what she thought of him. She looked at him carefully and nodded slightly. Even Natalia was surprised, and then turned to the guy and said that he could live in this mansion. Milia happily said that it was amazing, because he was recognized by the spirit of the mansion. The guy stood awkwardly, as he did nothing. The elf looked at them and thought that not only the warhorse, but also the spirit of the mansion. They sat down, and Natalia said that his rent would be 150,000 gil per month. She usually doesn't lower the price below 1,000,000, but she gave him a discount. Kisaragi Toya calculated that 1,800,000 would come out in a year. He can afford such a price, so he agreed. They were hungry, so they decided to celebrate the deal. The guy conjured a cake, but the girls did not see this, so he explained that it was a confection. Natalia looked at him with a strange face and tasted a piece. Her eyes sparkled. She said it was so sweet and so delicious. Milia also enjoyed dessert, as it was also the first time she had tasted such a thing. Kisaragi Toya said that the power of sweets is scary, but he is glad that they liked it. A moment later, Natalia with an empty plate asked for some more. The guy replied that there was no more left, since he couldn't just take things out of storage. The elf was depressed, and then turned to him with a proposal that if she gave this mansion to him, he would give her some more of this cake. Kisaragi Toya jumped up from such a suggestion, and Milia asked what she was talking about. Natalia can't even live in this place anyway, as it's not such a bad deal. The former owner of the mansion was enjoying dessert. Milia asked if she could have a little, but the elf refused, in principle, as expected. Instead, she turned to the guy and said that if it was a contract of sale, then he needed to go to the merchant guild, where she would take him. They left the mansion, and Natalia, sparkling with happiness, said that if there was still such a thing left, then she was ready to eat at least a dozen. Kisaragi Toya never thought that he would exchange sweets for a mansion. Kokuya also seemed to like the place, as he was having fun rolling around on the grass. The procedure in the merchant guild was completed, so Kisaragi Toya was about to leave when the girl stopped him and informed him that he still had to pay the property tax, which this year is 2 million gil. The guy was shocked by this amount. The tax is so big because the mansion is quite expensive, and also because no one has lived in it until now, the amount has accumulated. Natalia didn't think, or rather, she didn't expect, that someone who Ferris recognizes would appear. They decided that they could not sell the mansion with the spirit to those whom he did not recognize. But Natalia is an exception in this case. The elf got up from the sofa and, waving to the guy, told him not to pay attention, and also to take care of Ferris. Kisaragi Toya felt so unusual because he never thought that he would have a luxurious mansion in another world. He was thinking about what he would do next. He waved his hand and told Kokuya that it was better for him to go back to the vault for now, and the horse really disappeared. The guy was very surprised, because he accidentally did it. He thought that in this world it is impossible to move living beings to the storage. Maybe it happened because Kokyu was originally a subject. This means that he didn't need this huge mansion at all. However, he can't keep the horse in storage all the time, so he got it back. Kokyu began to chew the guy's head more aggressively than usual. Kisaragi went inside the mansion and addressed Ferris with the words that he was at home. She immediately appeared in front of him, so the guy came to the conclusion that she understands him. He asked to take care of him, and also said that it was unexpected, but he asked to show this mansion to him. Toya thought she smiled, but immediately dismissed these thoughts. Perhaps his imagination was just playing out. Everyone said that the house spirit's facial expression doesn't change, and they also can't speak. Before other people know about it, the spirits will live in the house and guard it carefully. They say that the house in which the spirit lives is not destroyed and retains its current state as it is. However, the spirit of the house chooses its own master and master. Many people have wanted this mansion for many decades, but it seems Ferris has not recognized a single person. They looked around the house until they reached the bathroom. It turned out to be huge and very beautiful. Kisaragi Toya immediately asked if he could use it at any time, to which Ferris slowly nodded. As expected, since people in this world are like the Japanese, then there should definitely be a bath. For a guy to be able to use it every day is just wonderful. In any case, Ferris has done a good job maintaining this mansion. The guy needs to redo his lifestyle a little, raise the level and check his stuff. There is quite a lot of work to be done. He thought about everything and was about to get out of the bath when he saw Ferris. The guy immediately turned away and asked her to come out. He was told that the house spirit would take care of him, but even in the bathroom, Kisaragi Toya noticed that she brought him a new set of clothes, so he decided that he would have to thank her properly. The guy changed his clothes and sat down in a chair. It had been so long since he had taken such a bath. Ferris will do all the housework for him. The spirits of the house are really a great blessing. He was wondering why the spirit recognized him. He thought about asking her directly. However, he fell asleep while thinking about different things. Ferris covered him with a blanket, sat down next to him and looked at his face. In the morning, he packed up and informed her that he was leaving and would stay in the forest for 3 days, as he was going to make several guild requests, as well as raise his level a little. He asked her to take care of the mansion at this time. It seemed to him that she had a restless look, so he said that everything would be fine and explained that despite his appearance, he was quite strong, so he would return home soon. Kisaragi Toya sat on the fallen goblins and thought about working to pay for his house after coming to another world. The reward for the request should be enough, but he thought that maybe he should earn a little more money. After all, with the effect of this ring, its level rises much faster. Despite the fact that he told Ferris that he would be back in 3 days, the guy thought to stay a little longer. Ferris was patiently waiting for the owner of the house at this time. Kisaragi defeated all the monsters he met for several days and put them in his storage. Even if the number of items increased, he didn't feel any weight. During this adventure, he discovered various interesting things during the fights. For example, a weapon that had become blunt due to the blood of monsters became clean, and its sharpness was restored as soon as he put it back in storage and took it out again. The same thing happens with the mantle and other clothes. After a long hunt and recycling of materials, the time has finally come. The status has been opened, all thanks to a tricky ring that increases the experience gained 100 times. Kisaragi Toya has reached the 100th level and advanced on the path of becoming a berserker. He opened the function of changing jobs, so he, without thinking twice, chose a change to a warrior. However, completely different options for changing the profession appeared on the screen. The only jobs he can switch to are High Mage and High Priest. He drooped to the ground, because other work is also related to magic. He had already read the book and learned all the magic of recovery. If he becomes a high mage, he will continue to study magic. Kokyu attacked the guy's head again, and he sadly replied that he was in a bad condition now. He decided to continue hunting because it doesn't matter what his profession is as long as he has a sword. So Kisaragi Toya became the highest magician of the 1st level. His next goal was to bring the profession of the highest magician to the 100th level. Next, he would like to know what profession he can switch to next time. The guy does all this in order to become a berserker. He had finally returned home after being away for so long. Kisaragi Toya entered the house and called Ferris, apologizing for being late. She immediately appeared in front of him and with tears in her eyes said that she was very worried about him because he was late. The guy awkwardly tried to explain that he was too focused on raising the level. At some point, he realized that the girl could talk and was glad because he really wanted to talk to her. He immediately thanked her for looking after the mansion. At that time, somewhere in the city, Milia was talking to a man who found out that the guy he had high hopes for had bought a house in this city. The girl said that if a great adventurer like him settled in the city, it would help their guild a lot. The man replied that he had heard a lot of compliments about the guy from the Dalek team, so Subguildmaster Ebrand is looking forward to meeting Kisaragi Toya. The guy came to Milia and found out that his rank in the guild had suddenly jumped to C despite the fact that he had only recently raised his rank. Suddenly a man came out, with whom the girl spoke not so long ago, and said that this was a request from him. He introduced himself to the guy. Other adventurers immediately drew attention to him, so the man wished everyone a good morning and told them to continue to complete tasks and receive heaps of money. Everyone cheerfully supported his statement. He asked Kisaragi to borrow some of his time. They went to the materials development site, where one of the workers saw him and immediately reported it to Dalek, who was a little surprised. Workers with tears in their eyes shouted that the guy was forbidden to come there because they were still sorting out a bunch of materials from the last time. They weren't even ready to hear in jest that the guy brought even more. At Kisaragi's reaction, Toya thought it was better not to tell them that he still had plenty of everything in the vault. The man told him that the magician had become a full-fledged adventurer since he received the C rank. He also added that they will have enough materials for now. Kisaragi was embarrassed to notice that he was called full-fledged. The sub-guild master went on to say that he was waiting for the young man because he wanted to ask him to complete the task. This is the escort of merchants, which the guy immediately refused. The man, playing with the goblin's body, asked to reconsider his decision. Kisaragi Toya replied this way because, obviously, the task promises to be troublesome. Plus he doesn't want to leave Ferris at home alone. but he said out loud in his defense that there was something he wanted to explore, so now he does not accept long-term assignments like someone's escort. By this time, Milia came running, who had finished updating the magician's card. It marked the 57th level and the profession of a magician, although after changing his profession he became a higher magician. However, it is not displayed in the card. For everything else, except for the level and age, to change in the card, you need a special tool. He is needed because, first of all, there is no person in this world who could change his name or profession, since maps are artifacts, the principle of which has not been fully studied until now. Precisely because of this, Kisaragi Toya does not need to worry that anyone will find out about his job change. The man said he couldn't believe it because he had heard that the guy was raising his level too fast, but it was all extremely abnormal. The highest adventurer rank in Fandi, a rank, and it took this person 20 years to reach the 42nd level. However, judging by his level, the guy should already be S rank. Toya was surprised that in this world it takes so much time to raise the level. Although if you think about it, no one here has an item multiplying experience points. They could not find out in any way that after reaching the 100th level, it would be possible to change their profession. The man said that if such a talent became known, he would no doubt be invited to work at the royal palace and would be held there in every possible way. Still, it's not so bad to work for the royal family, but his career as an adventurer will end. Kisaragi Toya frowned after the words about the royal family. He immediately remembered the day when he came to this world. Ebren noticed his reaction and came to the conclusion that it seemed that the magician himself did not want to work for the government. He offered to leave everything as it is and told the girl not to tell anyone about it. All the while they were talking, the man was quietly taking out a magic stone from the goblin, and when they finished, he wiped his hands and gave it to Dalek. He turned to the magician, reminding him that the young man had something he wanted to explore, and said that if so, then maybe he could help him. The man brought him to the materials room, which their guild is proud of. He said that it contains information about the history of this country, neighboring countries, and so on. So maybe he can find what he's looking for. Kisaragi Toya enthusiastically asked if everything was alright, to which the man replied that everything that could be seen here was precious. So the guy has to pay a reasonable price if he wants to use it all. He proposed a condition under which the guy accepts the previously proposed task from the man. And he, in turn, will make an exception, and Kisaragi Toya will be able to use everything for free. The magician thought that in any case he was thinking about the escort mission and, come to think of it, it's not such a bad deal. He agreed, so the man allowed the items to be used as the guy wants, but he is not allowed to take them out of this place. The man, leaving, said that they were leaving in 10 days, and the guy should not be late. Milia said she would go too, as she needed to sort out the paperwork. She added with a smile that even if the man said that there would be a payment for use, it would be equal to about 1 copper coin. In any case, very few people come to this place, and these precious books are ordinary manuscripts. But despite this, she was glad that the young man did not say that he wanted to give up the position of an adventurer. Kisaragi Toya, while leaving the room, realized that he had been deceived, and Ebrand is pretty good at such things. At the entrance to the building, he was met by an elf who was already tired of waiting. The guy asked what she needed from him, to which she awkwardly crumpled. Natalia replied with admiration that she could not forget the taste of this sweetness, as well as the fact that she had already eaten everything. She asked if Kisaragi Toya wasn't going to leave her like that. The elf was not sure if he was listening to her at all, and the guy replied that he would listen to her anyway. He thought that he just had a few questions about Ferris. They returned to the mansion, where they were met by Ferris, who greeted the owner. Kisaragi Toya also asked if anything had happened while he was away. The girl answered in the negative and asked why the guy came back so early. Natalia watched their conversation from the side in shock. Kisaragi was surprised that she didn't know about it either. The elf replied that she had never heard of the mansion's spirit being able to speak. She said a little dejectedly that she had lived in this mansion for a very long time, but there were so many things she didn't know about. Kisaragi Toya waved his hand to Natalia and said goodbye, to which she shouted at him to wait. The girl did not say that she wanted them for free. She offered the guy in exchange of a special class magic book and a book about search magic for a small amount of sweets. The magician wondered if there was a special class in the book, the same large-scale magic as in the game. It's definitely a great deal, so he agreed. At the same time, he invited her to have dinner with them, since she had come. As the guy expected from her, the elf exchanged 2 books for sweets. On the table there was an assorted grill with various types of meat, which restores the average amount of hunger. Toya told her to try it, but warned her that the food was hot. Natalia held out her fork to the food with disbelief and tasted it. She had never eaten such tender meat. She really liked it, so she began to eat the food very quickly. Kisaragi Toya turned around and noticed Ferris standing behind him. She, as always, did not eat anything. House spirits absorb the magical power of the earth and receive vital energy from it. The guy hoped that someday they could eat together and chat at the same table. Ferris flew up to the guy and said that when Toya is here, the magic power is delicious. He wondered about the fact that magic power has a taste. Natalia thought again that there seemed to be too many things she didn't know about. This guy is full of mysteries. In the end, they never came to a full conclusion about Ferris, and it seems that the elf really liked the chocolate cake that the magician showed her as she kept eating it. When she finished, she said it was time for her to go and began to pack. On the way out, she turned back and said that she wouldn't mind if Kisaragi Toya brought her souvenirs from time to time. The guy looked after her and thought that she really seriously came just to eat sweets. Natalia left him a special class magic book and a book of search magic. Kisaragi Toya began to study it and realized that theoretically, the magic of transfer in space is possible. Then, it's the magic they used on him in Henrietta Kingdom that teleported him to this place. Even so, it was still quite difficult for him to understand all this. Kisaragi Toya admired this book and wondered which genius wrote it. In search of an answer, he opened the first page with the authors and saw the name of Sage Natalia there. He was shocked why she was the one, although the book turned out to be interesting. Because of this, he wondered if it was possible for an elf to be such an amazing person. Before the day of departure for the escort mission, he needed to look into the materials room for his research, in order to get as much information about this world as possible. But when he opened the map inscribed on the parchment, Kisaragi Toya was taken aback. This is because the Henrietta Kingdom, the Luneta Empire, and the Sifansi Empire, which were familiar to him from the game, exist in this world. The guy hovered over the map. It's not that he didn't expect it. There are several countries here that he has never heard of. The Sarandi Kingdom he is currently in is one of them. He began to look for the city of Fandi, where he is now. A girl approached Kisaragi Toya from behind, who pointed out the city on the map and said that they were here. She stood close and asked the guy if he was studying the escort route. The magician, when he realized how close the girl was standing, screamed. She in turn apologized for scaring him. She asked Kisaragi Toya if he was and introduced herself as Lumina. She is the leader of this accompanying mission. The guy remembered that 2 more groups of adventurers would go with him. The girl yawned, as Ebrin called them early this morning. Although her hangover from yesterday still hasn't gone away. Lumina waved her hand to him and said that it was nice to meet her, and also that she had high hopes for him. Kisaragi Toya didn't say anything, as he didn't know what to say to her. He returned to studying the map. And if you follow it, the Henrietta Kingdom is not so far away from them. Will he be able to return to his world if he goes there? At least they should have a clue. However, if he leaves this world so suddenly, the day of dispatch has arrived. Ferris raced with all her might to the owner, who was waiting for her with his war horse. She hasn't shown up since the guy told her he was going away for a while. He sat down in front of the girl and told her that he would be back in 8 days, at least in 10. The magician asked her to look after the house while he was away. Ferris asked the guy to hurry up and come back as soon as possible. From such words, he even doubted his participation in this mission. But they said goodbye anyway. Lumina informed the others that this time their task was to escort the merchants to the city of Dumbledore. Their job is to ensure the safety of cargo and merchants to their destination and back. She also informed the team that they had been notified of the appearance of high-ranking monsters along the main path, so everyone should be on alert. The Pasture Fangs team consisted of D-rank guys. Kisaragi Toya was approached by a man who recognized him. He had heard a lot about the guy from his friend. He said that the guy had helped him in the forest earlier. Apparently he was talking about those merchants. The man said that the magician is very young for C rank. It seems he is a wonderful adventurer, so the man asked to take care of them. After completing the training camp, they finally set off. Kisaragi Toya talked to Kokyu about the need to hurry up and finish this mission in order to get home faster. Dal, a D-rank warrior, made fun of the guy because he looked too smug. Dal assumed that Kisaragi Toya got the C rank because he was in a strong team, since a magician like him would not be able to kill a goblin. The warrior told him not to pretend to be cool, just because he was higher in rank. After all, in any case, only they will be able to fight normally. The magician was not surprised and thought that Dal probably would not believe that Kisaragi Toya had done everything alone before. The guys were driving and Dal hoped out of boredom that a goblin would appear. His teammates asked him what he was talking about. It seemed to them that it was better when it was safe. The warrior turned to the magician and said that then they would not be able to show their real strength to this guy. He also added that he didn't want Kisaragi Toya to behave so arrogantly. Lumina appeared next to the magician, who said not to pay attention to him. She explained that during adventures, the people here look down on magicians. The guy wondered why this was happening, since healers are important to the team in games. Lumina explained that this is because the healers are always in the rear. If the vanguard is killed, the healer, who cannot attack, has no choice but to run so as not to get hurt. Especially for those teams where everyone is close to each other, no one wants to see their buddies abandoned to their fate. She added that if you fight with someone, you will surely understand. But being a healer isn't so bad either. Toya was interested in the girl's words about the connection between the team members. After all, joining the team is not so bad for him. Tokyu looked at the guy and he looked around. This was the right place, so Kisaragi Toya activated the search magic. This spell is a theory he took from a book on magic research that Natalie wrote. This is only a theory, but Kisaragi Toya completed it as his original spell. By subtly spreading magical power within himself, he creates a thread of magical power that senses the movements of surrounding enemies. He sensed 3 forest boars 300 meters away. He, using one attack spell, which he learned after he changed jobs to a high magician, created air blades and attacked boars. Toya waved his hand and thought that should be enough. By this point, Lumina came up. She asked if the guy had finished. Then she suddenly asked if the guy had ever eaten orc meat that he picked up from the ground. To Kisaragi Toya's puzzled face, she replied that she was just joking. Lumina added that at this pace they should get there soon, and the guy was only thinking that he wanted to go home faster to see Farah's cute face. He doesn't have time to deal with pathetic enemies. It was getting dark, so they set up camp. Dal and Milka, a D-rank thief, were sitting and eating dried meat. The warrior sadly asked Milka if there was anything besides him, to which she replied that there was nothing. Dal, seeing Kisaragi Toya approaching, who was looking around, said that it was normal to carry food with him. He waved a piece of meat towards the guy with a smile and asked if he wanted to eat their food too. The magician looked at him awkwardly and finally found the right place that he had been looking for all this time. Kisaragi Toya waved his hand and a table appeared on which there was a hot meal. There was a pot of soup, salad, bread and tea. The guy started picking up food for himself and said out loud that the food was still hot because it had just been cooked when he put it in his storage. He began to eat under the surprised looks of the team. Lumina came up and said that the food the magician eats looks so appetizing, while she only eats dried meat. Akina, also a member of the team, as well as a D-rank mage, said softly that the food looked delicious. Kisaragi Toya had many more, so he invited them to join him. The team sat down with him at the dinner table. Lumina, eating soup, said that she would never have thought that she would eat something like this in such a place. She added in a relaxed way that if there was a little more alcohol, it would be perfect. Milka turned to her and asked her to be patient until they reached the city. Kit, a D-rank archer, called Dal and asked if he wanted to join because the food was really delicious. The warrior nervously asked why he needed it, and then shouted in the direction of the magician that he had probably greased up to some strong team to go on this mission. The archer crossed his arms over his chest and replied that the magician was the owner of the storage skill. He's willing to bow his head to him since he reached C rank at that age, and then apologized because he might be too stubborn. They finally made it to Dumbledore Town unharmed. While the people were unloading the carts, Lumina talked to the man about how this time they were so lucky because they didn't come across any monsters. However, they cannot let their guard down when they return. Lumina noticed Toya and Kokyu at Kisaraga's side and wondered if she would never find out about the magician's power. They went to a tavern, where they decided to drink until they passed out, because tomorrow is their day off. Lumina approached the magician and said that he should drink too. Kisaragi Toya didn't exactly hate liquor, but he took a sip anyway. The ale in this world is so warm, which is why the guy couldn't drink it, but he remembered that he could use magic to make it colder. The girl noticed these machinations and asked what he was doing. The magician replied that he had just done something to improve his drink and invited the girl to try it. She took his mug and took a sip. It was cold and delicious, so she silently took her mug with a smile and pointed at it. The guy cooled the drink for her, and then almost the whole team tried it. Keith didn't know that the taste could change so much if you just cool the drink. Lumina approached the warrior and said that he should try it too. Dal began to refuse, but the girl hugged him around the neck and asked again, so he took and drank. Dal was thinking that the drink was just cooled down, so there could be such a thing in it. However, he really liked it, so Kisaragi Toya said he could do more, and then added with a smile that the magician could be quite useful. Dal smiled awkwardly and looked away. Suddenly, Lumina approached the magician and offered to have a serious conversation. She put her finger to his lips and told him to be with her forever and cool the ale for her. The next morning, Kisaragi Toya woke up and went outside thinking that if the team had drunk so much, then they must still be asleep. They are free for the whole day and can do what they want. Milia informed the guy before that if he was a member of the guild, it would be easy to find a job for him in this city, so he decided to go to the guild. There is not a single specialty that stands out in the city of Dumbledore, but as a trading city, it is very lively. After some time walking around the city, the guy found a guild. At the entrance, a little boy grabbed him by the jacket, who asked if the guy could use healing magic. Kisaragi Toya replied that he could and asked if the boy needed to heal the wound, to which he replied that it was not for him. The boy handed over 3 copper coins, which were his savings, and asked to cure the illness of his little sister Saya. He said he asked everyone, but they told him it wasn't enough. Someone waved his hand in the direction of the boy and asked why he was still walking around. 3 men were standing in front of them and one of them said that he had already said that a stray child from the slum should not be here, and no adventurer would listen to his request with that kind of money. He began to swear at the boy, and then asked if the children from the orphanage did not receive a good education. Then this man turned to the magician with the words that the boy could not pay the money. He said that even if you amuse this boy, you won't get anything from him, and then he stretched out his hand to him. Kisaragi Toya intercepted her and, with the words that he did not remember asking his opinion, twisted the man's hand. He crouched down in pain, and his friends began to take out weapons to intercede for a friend. Suddenly, the girl loudly asked about what was going on and what these people were doing here. She loudly announced that fights at the guild are prohibited, so the men put away their weapons and began to leave. One of them turned around saying that he remembered it. The girl from the guild recognized these guys, and the boy turned to the magician again. Kisaragi Toya introduced himself and asked what the boy's name was, to which he replied Leal. The magician told the boy to give him all his money, and then patted him on the head and said that he accepted his offer. They moved not so far from the center as they found themselves in the slums. A trading city means that there is a large influx of people here. The boy called the magician and pointed to the side. Leal was met by other children who were very happy to see him and immediately asked how everything went. Leal replied that he had brought someone who could use healing magic. One girl enthusiastically asked the magician if he was a healer, and Kisaragi drew attention to a girl who was hiding behind a toy. They asked if he could heal his little sister, to which he replied in the affirmative and said to leave it to him. Kisaragi Toya asked if there were any adults in this place, to which he was told that there was not, so Sister Seiya is doing everything possible. However, because she worked so hard, she became very ill. Lying on the bed was a girl who was about the same age as Kisaragi Toya now. She's the one taking care of all these kids. The children reported that it had been a whole week, but she was not getting better. The guy put his hand on her forehead to check the temperature, which turned out to be quite high. The children asked if she would recover, and then they cried. Kisaragi Toya repeated again that they should leave it to him. However, he is not a doctor, so the only thing he can do is carefully apply the healing spells he can use. After a while, Seiya came to her senses. She got up and first of all ran to check on the guys. When she came out, she saw a table set in Kisaragi Toya, who said that there was a lot of food here, so they could eat as much as they wanted. The guys saw the girl and ran up to her, telling her that Kisaragi Toya cured her with his magic. The girl understood the situation and was very embarrassed because she was in a nightgown, so she quickly ran away to change clothes. When she returned, she thanked the magician for not only using magic to heal her, but also feeding the children. The girl was surprised because the pot appeared out of nowhere. Kisaragi Toya said that there was no need to worry about the payment, because he had already accepted an assignment from Leal. The guy added that he has no family. The girl was grateful and said that if there was something she could do, but at that moment her stomach rumbled loudly. The guy said that if everything was fine, then she could have lunch with them. They sat down at the table and began to eat. Seiya was delighted with the soup, and she also added that there are so many ingredients in it. The magician asked her if she was running this place. It turned out that the girl's mother ran this place, but she died of an illness last year. Many people living in the area are those who lost their home or family during the invasion of the Henrietta Kingdom. The families of these children also died. There was only a girl left who could protect these children, and she was determined to fulfill this duty. Seiya said the Henrietta Kingdom would pay for it. Kisaragi Toya said that it was not good to force yourself, to which the girl replied that it was for the good of everyone. He asked if the girl knew that Leal was desperately trying to ask everyone on the street to help her. Everyone wanted to be useful to her. That's why he said it's okay to rely on others. The girl started crying, and then said that she understood. Kisaragi Toya tried to calm her down, which is why Seiya apologized and said that he misunderstood everything. The children who were watching them through the window began to call them a sweet couple, which confused both of them very much. It was getting dark outside, so Toya started packing. The children, noticing this, asked if he was leaving. Kisaragi Toya replied that he was leaving this city tomorrow, and then took out a pot from the storage. He said he would leave them some soup, so they should all eat. The girl was very surprised that the pot appeared out of nowhere. Everyone went out to see the guy off, and Leal, standing next to Seiya, told Kisaragi Toya to come again, because his sister also wants it. The magician replied that if he was in this city, he would definitely come to them. They waved after him with wide smiles. Kisaragi Toya was worried about those kids, but what can he do? While he was walking back, an old man came up to him and asked him to treat him to ale. The guy tried to refuse, but the man did not give up. He even said that he knows a good place where there are girls. The guy tried to leave, when suddenly the man fell to the ground. He was hit by a man with whom they had a fight at the guild in the city. They searched for him for a long time and finally found him. The man with the sword in his hand said with a smile that he had slightly touched him, and the old man was just exaggerating. Kisaragi Toya rushed to his aid, and the man was lying on the floor and muttering that he was in pain. The man cheerfully said that the magician was an important person this afternoon, and then asked if the guy was really one of those people who become pitiful in front of others. He also added that he can only tell by looking at him that he has high-quality equipment. From all this, they came to the conclusion that the magician is some kind of rich guy. They said that this place is a slum, so if one adventurer dies here, no one will notice it. The old man, lying on the ground, told the guy to run away because he shouldn't mess with them. Kisaragi Toya said not to worry and used healing magic. The old man's back didn't hurt anymore, so the magician told him to hurry up and get out of here. The adventurers concluded that the guy is a priest, and they only run away well, and succeed. The man grabbed Toyu by the collar of Kisaragi and said that if he ran away, they would take care of the boy he was with during the day. The old man quickly ran away screaming, and the man continued to say that there is a beautiful girl in the place where those children live, which they will also take care of. He continued to approach the magician and provoke. Kisaragi Toya waved his hand and in it Buster's sword, the handle of which hit the man's jaw with such force that he flew off to the side. They were surprised that the magician has a storage skill. Kisaragi Toya decided to do what he likes. The guy has never fought one-on-one in real life, but Seiya and the kids will be in danger if he just leaves these guys. The men said emphatically that the guy is a profession that uses magic, so they can't be scared by such a bluff. The magician tried to remember how he would have done it in the game and began to attack. A few deft sword strikes and the opponents were defeated. They were shocked that the guy uses a sword and fighting skills, although in theory he is an ordinary priest. Kisaragi Toya stood and thought about what had just happened. Anyone can become an adventurer, no matter how rotten that person is inside. The man tried to run away, but the old man who supported the magician stood in his way. So he shouted at him to get out of the way and tried to hit him with a sword. However, his weapon broke in half. The man trembled and turned to the magician, who, stretching out 2 fingers, told him to stop behaving this way. The magician was serious. He said that at this rate he would not be able to restrain himself from beating the man. They returned to the city, to the Adventurers Guild. Kisaragi Toya tied up the men and gave them to the girl who sent them to the dungeon. As the guy expected, it turned out to be quite pleasant to fight. The girl from the guild said that they had already had these 3 under suspicion, but so far they had no proof. However, this time they have a witness, and they will finally be able to bring them to justice. She turned to the guy and asked for forgiveness for involving a person from another city in their problems. She asked if there was anything she could help with, to which Kisaragi Toya immediately said that there was a girl named Seiya who had a shelter in the slums. The magician wanted the guild to take care of the children in that orphanage. They're still small, but they live in a place where people like those guys live. The girl replied that the guild would take responsibility for this shelter. Then she added that there are such good adventurers in Fandi. Kisaragi Toya turned to the old man and said that he would go, since he had to get up early. He was glad that he didn't have to worry about Seiya and the kids anymore. And I also thought that I would need to buy souvenirs for Natalia. Meanwhile, the elf in Fandi, standing at the guild's reception desk, was shocked that the magician would be gone for a while, which means that she would not be able to eat his cooking. Milia replied that he would be back in 2 days, and Natalia was only thinking about what she had now. The adventurer looked at her and asked what kind of child she was, and the other person replied that she was an elf in charge of a magic tool shop who proclaimed herself a sage. She paid attention to these men, and then, apologizing for the trouble, was about to leave, but Milia called her because she wanted to ask something. They went to Natalia's store, where they sat down to drink tea. The girl said that she had become Kisaragi Toya's personal secretary, so Natalia assumed that the question would be about the magician. Milia asked if anything seemed strange when he was received by the spirit of the house. The elf said she didn't know and it was up to the spirit of the house to decide. However, there are people who have been loved by spirits since birth, and she knew such a person. When she lived in that country, Natalia was a magician of the immortal shrine. Milia interrupted her with a question about the fact that the elf was such an important person. Despite this, it is still quite important. The country she lived in was different from countries where the human race outnumbered others, like the Henrietta Kingdom, a place where the most diverse races could live without oppression. Natalia's abilities were recognized, and she worked there for quite a long time as a magician of the immortal shrine. After the invasions of the Henrietta Kingdom subsided, Natalia decided it was time to leave her position, and also because the ruler has grown into a beautiful emperor. He asked her what she was going to do after leaving the palace, to which she replied that she was going to relax and go on a trip. She would settle down somewhere and open her own shop, and she was also thinking about a way to achieve the goal of becoming a supreme sage, which was written about in an ancient book in an elven village. The emperor, knowing her, was confident that she would be able to achieve this. He told Natalia to show herself to Charlotte one last time before leaving the country, because she loves her very much. The king had a daughter named Charlotte, and this girl was given a special power at birth, the ability to be loved by spirits. Natalia came to Charlotte, who was communicating with spirits at that moment. The elf has always been inside the castle, ever since the emperor was a child, but Natalia still asked the girl to call her not aunt, but elder sister. Charlotte asked if Natalia was going somewhere, to which she replied that this place was not so far away, and she would probably return when the girl was already a bride. Natalia said that the girl is the future empress, so she is an integral part for the good future of this country. She also added that the spirits love Charlotte, and one day she will grow up and be able to use their magic. They were interrupted by a girl who was looking for a princess. She asked her to come back immediately because the music teacher was furious. Charlotte turned to Archeria and sadly said that the teacher scolds her when she does something wrong. Natalia told Archeria that it must be difficult to look after Charlotte, to which the girl replied that the princess was already 5 years old, and she was behaving so carelessly. Archeria asked why Natalia is called a lowly sage. The elf woman with a menacing look asked who said it, because she would personally teach a lesson that they would never forget. The girls quickly began to pack up and leave. 10 years have passed since then, so Natalia hopes that those children were brought up properly. It's not that Ferris didn't recognize her when she bought this mansion. It just seems like there was a little misunderstanding with the merchant guild. Of course Ferris allowed her to live in this mansion. She just thought that a mansion with a spirit, it's quite interesting. Milia asked what then needs to be done so that the spirit recognizes you. Natalia replied that there are many things in this world that she does not know about. She thought about these things, because if there really is a way to become a sage, then it must be Kisaragi Toya. The guy was already on his way back at that time. They decided to set up camp, and Lumina said she hoped it would be as peaceful as it had been throughout their journey. She looked at Kokyu and said how good it is to have a war horse, and every adventurer dreams of such a thing. Kisaragi Toya said that it just happened to fall into his hands because he couldn't say that it was just lying in his storage. She asked what Dal thought about it, to which the warrior replied that the guy just wanted to stand out, but since he cooled his ale, it's worth admitting that he's not bad. The magician noted that Dal's attitude had changed since he cooled his ale. Suddenly Kisaragi Toya noticed something, so he immediately used search magic. He found a group of monsters, but the guy wouldn't be able to defeat them using only long-range magic. But there were too many of them. He informed Lumina that a group of monsters was coming at them. She knew by the sound that they were orcs. The story begins its fascinating narrative. The description introduces readers to the magic tower in the form of a mixture of various items. So, for example, at the very top there was a blue fire that hovered over a rather large barrel, around which vines of golden plants were tied. Above them was the silhouette of a man. Apparently, he was watching something using his phone, because it was possible to trace how a bright blue light enveloped his face. At the very bottom of the tower there were chains, chests with mysterious drawings and stone structures that glowed with different colors. In the new episode, the picture allows viewers to see the character a little closer, and indeed he was looking at the screen of his phone. The man had a sharp nose and chin. His forehead was covered with slightly overgrown bangs. However, at the moment, it was difficult to see his face. Suddenly, the narrative asks a question, probably to the readers. He was interested when someone was reading webtoons, and the next moment he made the assumption that he was in a forgotten transport early in the morning. Apparently, a subway car appeared in front of the audience, in which there were people going about their business. Someone was chatting with friends. Others were looking at their phones, or during short retreats during the day. But regarding the following judgment, after him, a sinister smile appeared on the new episode From Ear to Ear, which revealed a view of dazzling white teeth. The story once again draws readers' attention to a tall tower of mysterious objects of various shapes and sizes. As it turned out, the action was conducted around a heavenly castle called a terrarium, which was closed from all sides by the sea and a large shore. It was so high that it reached the clouds. The painting described that the castle had dark brown walls with lots of windows. And then two characters appeared in the background. The first wore a red robe with a brown cloak. On his belt behind his back hung a cold weapon, to which a man with blonde hair was pulling a hand in a red glove. And the second one, standing in front of the first one, was wearing white and blue equipment. He had long white hair that fluttered in the wind. Apparently, they were rivals. Readers could guess based on the fact that they were directed against each other and were in the big arena. It became known in the next episode that the first man named Dean belonged to the swordsman class and belonged to the second rank. And the second character turned out to be a girl at all. Her name was Nagi, and she was also considered a swordsman, but the rank was first. Mentally, the hero thought that they had finally managed to meet, when suddenly the guy rushed to run in the direction of the lady, raising huge clouds of smoke and dust after him. That's just the girl continued to stand quietly and watch her opponent. When he managed to get close to her after a short period of time, he struck her using a sword with a rather large blade. However, readers may have noticed how she pulled her hand away. With this maneuver, she managed to save time to form a magical stream of golden-colored energy, which a moment later was already flying into Dean. It had the appearance of a flame. That's just that he managed to react correctly and reflect the blow. Both characters pointed their hands at each other, preparing for a counterattack. Nagi used a new push. Blue energy charges flew towards her opponent, which the guy perfectly skirted. In the next episode, he mentally exclaimed that he had managed to touch his cold weapons to an opponent whose eyes were burning scarlet. Nagi only said the words flaming sword out loud. Apparently, it was a spell, because a second later a huge stream of golden energy flew into the man. Suddenly, the space seemed to disappear, taking on the appearance of blue and white pixels. Then the image disappeared altogether. It became known to readers that all this time the two characters were not real. The story describes how they both appeared on the screen of some smartphone held by a guy with black hair while on the bus at the same time. He thought in his head that he was being mocked. The reason was that the stranger read it because he was told that it would be interesting, but only uploaded one chapter, which contained complete nonsense. The next episode shows how the guy started typing something. He came to the conclusion that the plot in which the main character of Manhwa lost to the strong, it was not curious. Before the eyes of readers, comments appeared in this Asian comic, which turned out to be far from rosy. Then the story allowed us to see the one belonging to a stranger. He wrote that if this becomes the best comment, whether with a flaming sword or not, then he will have to deal with a fool. Suddenly, the action describes how some silhouette was looking at him and laughed, because such childish behavior seemed funny to him. The stranger leaned on his left hand, and in his right hand he held a phone, the light of which shone in his face. This character pulled a smile and said out loud that leaving such a comment was too self-confident gesture. And then he said that if he was so guaranteed to be truthful, then he would like to try something. An index finger reached out to the smartphone screen. As it turned out, he left a like. The guy who wrote the comment thought that it was a good start. But when he read that the plot revealed the development of the main character more, he asked himself what this stranger was carrying for the absurdity, referring to the fact that it was a ridiculous explanation, because he blamed everything on disclosure. The character with black hair pulled a smile from ear to ear and began to follow the development of events, at the same time thinking about the fact that wasn't it a webtoon that should have been read for relaxation. Suddenly someone interrupted him. The guy was approached, asking him to move the bag. From such an unexpected action, the character's eyes widened, as if he was scared because of something. As it turned out, it was a girl with short dark hair and big green eyes. She was dressed in a school uniform, as readers might assume, with a bomber jacket over it. The guy stared at her with a questioning expression on his face. The story focused on his backpack, which was lying in a nearby place from a schoolboy holding a phone in his hands. In the next episode, it became known that the heroine's name was Yun Hiso. She closed her left eye, as if winking at him, and then sat down next to him. The girl put away her pink backpack, hanging it on her chest, and took out her smartphone. As it might seem, the student was worried about the unexpected appearance of the heroine, because you could see how beads of sweat appeared on his face, and his lips trembled from an unfamiliar feeling. He was embarrassed, although, in fact, he himself understood it. That's just the guy was wondering if he needed to pretend that he didn't know the girl. The character glanced at her. In the next episode, the situation became clearer to some extent. Yun Hiso was his classmate. The guy and she were not close at all, but the heroine still sat next to him. As it turned out, the girl was quite popular in their class, but nothing connected her with the narrator, despite the fact that she was constantly surrounded by people. The guy asked himself a question, according to which he was trying to find the reasons for this behavior. In the next episode, the narration tells readers about how Yun Hiso handed her classmate banned substances. That was the reason. Such unexpected behavior on the part of the girl somewhat puzzled the guy. He bent his back. Drops of sweat appeared on his face. The character asked her a question. He wondered why she was doing this, and she, in turn, argued that her homeroom teacher had called her, so the heroine asked him to hold the banned substances for a while, and then return them on the lunch break. The student was silent for a couple of seconds because he did not know how to react to this situation correctly. He wondered why Yun Hiso had chosen him. She replied, referring to the fact that they were friends. Her words made the main character blush, but the story changed the topic to the number of reactions typed under the guy's comments. Now there were 20 of them. The action takes place on the territory of a school built of white brick. The classroom was in chaos. The desks were arranged in a chaotic order, as if a herd of horses had just walked. There were notebooks and other supplies on them. Chairs were displayed in the aisles. Someone was sleeping with his head on the table. Others were chatting, making a noise, which only made the crowd rage more. The main character is mired in his thoughts. It became known that he still took the banned substances that Yun Hiso had given him, except now he had no idea what he had to do. At some point, it seemed to him that the girl was too worried, so she could just keep them with her. In any case, why did the high school student need them? The guy turned his head over his right shoulder and looked back. Someone in the crowd shouted the incantation Flaming Sword. He was told to stop the character. The main character reflected that the third place from the entrance was occupied by his classmate, who at that moment was bursting with laughter. There were other characters of their class around her. The girl was holding a phone in her left hand and talking to her friends. The student decided to give her banned substances at lunch because there was very little left. Moreover, his attention was attracted by the recurring spell Flaming Sword. However, some guy laughed about it. His strange reaction was picked up by others. Another character asked the stranger if she had read the webtoons, adding that the last chapter was fiery. However, she answered him, asking for a chance to explain herself. Suddenly, someone entered into a dialogue with this group of guys, asking a question. He was interested in the fact whether they were talking about the player. As it turned out, it was the main character. The guy came up to them and said that he had seen him too. That's just such a sudden appearance to some extent puzzled the others. You could see surprise on their faces. Then he supplemented his answer by saying that the flaming sword they were talking about appeared in the last chapter. Readers could notice that the main character was very interested, which could not be said about the group of guys. The student wanted to express his point of view about the fact that the author was going to do something, but he was interrupted by a guy with square-rimmed glasses, who let him know that he had no idea. The next episode described how the main character began to get nervous. A dark aura formed around him. He twisted his face, making an assumption as to why there was such a cold reaction. It seemed to him that the students were not talking about webtoons. Then he was no longer interested in this fact. He looked at the group of guys surrounding Yun Hiso. The point was that he had cut in, even though he wasn't even close to any of them. After a short period of time, the guy pulled a smile from ear to ear, revealing a view of his brilliantly white teeth, and asked for forgiveness for interrupting them so unexpectedly. His face turned red with worry and embarrassment. Yun Hiso entered into the dialogue, around which a dark, disgusting energy was formed. She asked the question out loud. As it turned out, she was interested in whether the main character was the loser of their class. Such a terrible reaction puzzled the guy. His eyes widened to a huge size. Then the schoolboy, who looked like a bully, asked his friend with glasses if he had communicated with Ho Soljin, to which he gave a negative answer. The next moment, he asked the same question to the girl standing next to him. She also said that not really, and in the next episode, he asked, making the assumption that it was Yun Hiso. The schoolboy glanced at the sitting heroine and began to listen attentively to her. The girl also gave a negative reaction. Why did the main character fall into prostration at all? She didn't know him. No one else paid attention to Ho Soljin. He lowered his head and thought about something. There was talk around him that a group of guys were going to eat, saying that they were giving rice prosecutors today. That's just the speaker was asked what it is. As it turned out, this was the complete opposite of some rice thieves. Suddenly, a stranger grabbed the main character by the right shoulder, making the assumption that the students did not read the webtoons. This touch made Ho Soljin come alive. A yellow-haired hero appeared behind him. He said out loud that he read them every week, hanging on to his classmate. According to the guy's thoughts, it was Kim Taewon. They were noticed by school children who deliberately ignored the so-called loser. Someone from the class was surprised that Kim Taewon was also an otaku, which gave him goosebumps. A question was heard, according to which someone had just spoken about a flaming sword. And in response, a suspicion appeared. Did he really ask for the simple and obvious reason that he did not know? The action is focused on Ho Soljin, who began to gradually move away from all this turmoil. But as for Kim Taewon, he turned his head over his left shoulder and cast his gaze somewhere to the side. There was a dark aura around him, as if he was plotting something terrible. At this very moment, the silhouette of a mysterious character appeared, whose eyes were covered with a black object. He was in some kind of blue space and was smiling. And the comment of the main character still continued to gain positive reactions, which now numbered 46. It was warm outside. The story tells how some school children played ball in the yard. As it turned out, it was a physical education lesson. After all, Ho Soljin was wearing a sports uniform, and apparently he didn't like it. Moreover, he felt ashamed, and therefore decided to stand aside for a while. The main character lowered his head and continued to lead a chain of reflections. For him, it was not surprising that Yun Hiso lied, because what could she do? It would not be a plus for her. However, whatever prohibited substances would not affect him, now it concerned him. When suddenly a guy who looked like a bully turned over his right shoulder, addressing Subai and shouting at the top of his voice that the ball was flying to the side, so it was necessary to cover. At that moment, Ho Soljin noticed the object heading towards him, which alerted him to some extent, because the ball was flying at such a fast speed that it provoked the appearance of a wind flow. The episode showed a close-up of the real reaction of the main character, who clenched his jaw and thought to himself that now this game product was spoiling his mood. He was really angry because you could see the vessels on his face that were strained. There was a fire of anger in his eyes. The schoolboy made a swinging motion to deflect the ball, but he missed, and it just rolled away behind his back, hitting Kim Taewon's goal. The winning team exclaimed joyfully that the loser owed them ice cream. The guys stood silently and drooped because of the goal. At this moment, the main character was very nervous because the ball he missed really hit. Large drops of sweat were rolling down his face, when suddenly he was interrupted. Someone cursed and asked a question to Ho Soljin, referring to the fact that he did it on purpose. But the guy apologized with a scared look because he really wanted to cover up. But, as it turned out, this remark was dedicated not to him, but to Kim Taewon. A schoolboy with dark hair from Yun Hiso's group was addressing a blonde guy, and when he passed by the main character, he started running, wondering how he failed to block such a blow. He exclaimed with disdain that the winning team demanded ice cream from them. However, Kim Taewon argued that he was distracted by the webtoon, what greatly puzzled his comrades. The guy was too interested, and his classmates, a schoolboy with square-shaped glasses and a bully, made it clear to him that he should wait at least a half before reading his favorite player, because now he was crossing all boundaries. The main character was somewhat puzzled. At that moment, his comment got 67 positive reactions. In the next episode, the story describes to readers how Ho Soljin got rid of banned substances and watched the webtoon, at the same time coming to the conclusion that he did not give him any pleasure at all. He wondered how Kim Taewon could even be distracted by this. The main character felt ashamed when he remembered how he missed the ball. Suddenly, someone was talking. Someone was sorry. His interlocutor was curious about what the reason was, making the assumption that it was the ice cream. Except it wasn't. Ho Soljin recognized those voices. They belonged to his classmates. A guy with a sharp nose and black hair turned to Kim Taewon and with a funny expression on his face offered to tell the teacher that he had not handed over his phone. At that moment, the main character thought that physical education had already ended. But he did not want to go out. The next moment, a schoolboy who looked like a bully began to conduct a dialogue about the intervention of Ho Saljan. When he heard about it, he became surprised at the moment, rather even scared. Someone picked up his remark, referring to the fact that the guy had entered into a conversation, which greatly annoyed them. And as it turned out, the main character always did. Suddenly, a schoolboy with glasses from Yoon Hiso's group called out to Kim Taewon, saying that the guy was always covering for this Ho Saljan, and even today he did the same. A guy with black hair hung on the shoulder of the blonde man, who asked him a question, wondering if he didn't know that the guys went to high school together. Then his interlocutor made the assumption that they were close, but he was told that this was not the case. Kim Taewon himself has finally entered into the dialogue. He argued his behavior by saying that he just felt sorry for the main character. A dark grin was reflected on his face, and at this moment, Ho Saljan was wary, because this information surprised him. The bell rang. It became known that the next lesson will be Korean. Now the students were late, so they hurried each other. The story focused readers' attention on Kim Taewon, who turned a sad look to the left, and as it turned out, they noticed that there was someone extra among them. However, the main character did not understand this. At that moment, a blonde man appeared, who called him pathetic out loud. For a while he stood and waited for some kind of reaction, but after a short period of time he turned around. Such an unexpected action on his part strained Ho Saljan. Then he trembled. Moreover, the schoolboy hated webtoons in which the main characters lost to the strong. A picture of Kim Taewon and Yoon Hiso laughing happily appeared in his mind. The reason was that there were enough defeats in real life. He sat down on the cold tile and hung his head. But the next moment, the guy closed his hands into fists and said out loud that he had had enough. The narration again attracted the attention of readers to his comment, which has now gained 99 likes. When suddenly the figure changed to 2769, which continued to grow, reaching a value of 7,653,961, which did not stop there. Ho Saljan wanted to be the main character of the story. How suddenly readers could notice how the silhouette of the mysterious character smiled again with a mysterious smile. This man exclaimed that he should try to do it in this case. A charge similar to an electric one appeared in space. He headed towards the school, hitting it from above. There was a commotion inside her. Everyone made the assumption that it was lightning. And the main character at this moment could hear someone talking about how only he could defeat a first-level ranker. Ho Saljan was surprised, because the silhouette of a naga from a webtoon appeared in front of him. The voice informed him that an unknown person would refuse in front of him. How suddenly readers could notice how the body of the main character moved to the ring. He recognized him, and the swordsman with white hair at that moment asked him a question. He was interested in who the guy was, when suddenly history announced that Ho Saljan became a student, the name of the lowest class. The story continues its rapid development. This time she describes the action that took place around the swordsman Dean. A push went towards him, which surprised this character to some extent. Then he fell to his knees, and Nagi stood in front of him, holding a sword in her right hand. Suddenly, a voice announced that the fighter Dyer could no longer continue the fight, and the girl with white hair won the duel. The hands of the spectators, who had been watching the stoves all this time, rose up, when suddenly a big man with a horned helmet folded his arms on his chest and said out loud that there was no intrigue again. Moreover, in his opinion, everything was so predictable that it seemed like a waste of money. To his right stood a girl with blonde hair pulled back in a braid. The heroine was chewing something red and at the same time asked a question to her interlocutor. She was interested in what the tall tale he was talking about, referring to the fact that Dean managed to break through the wall of blue flame. That was the only thing that impressed. However, the character objected and wondered what was the point of this, because he still lost. However, readers may have noticed that the blonde was expecting such a reaction, when suddenly she approached her interlocutor, staring at him and forcing him to look at her, and exclaimed that the next thing she would say would be uttered once, so he had to listen carefully to her. According to her, it was the first time in the history of fighting when someone was able to break through the protection of the wall of blue flame. Moreover, the muscular man saw the historical moment with his own eyes. He asked her if it looked like the truth, and as it turned out, yes, because Naga had the first rank. Even better, she had an unshakable defense that no one could overcome. The painting described to readers a huge wall of several meters, which had a bright purple light. When she went up, she left behind a huge column of smoke to appear. This was a distinctive feature of Naga. Suddenly, the story sharpens attention to a large-sized zipper, which acquired a golden color and descended right in front of a character with long white hair. The narrator wondered what had happened, turning her head away from the dust that had risen. After a short period of time, she looked at her lizard, which she had eaten a little earlier, and exclaimed in an offended tone that she had dropped it. She was upset for the simple reason that she left the ponytail for later, and now it was no longer possible to eat it. Suddenly, a muscular man with a horned helmet on his head started talking. He was surprised, because his interlocutor had said a little earlier that it was the first time when someone broke through the protection. And then the character pointed somewhere ahead, urging the girl to take a look. At that moment, Nagi was greatly discouraged. Her red eyes were rounded to an incredible size. The reason was simple and obvious: the wall was breached. In front of the girl with white hair stood the main character in a school uniform, whose face was exposed by small abrasions. No one understood what was going on. Someone from the crowd shouted out that it was like a kind of miracle because some unknown person appeared in front of the invincible Nagi. Yes, and in the very center of her protective spell. The story described how Ho Seoljin stood in a small pit in front of the girl and watched the situation unfold. And Dean was lying on the side on the ground and thinking that it just couldn't be. The wall, which a second-level fighter could barely hook, was destroyed in an instant. There were still huge clouds of smoke around the main character, only now they opened up a view of his figure. He carried himself with pride, as if he knew what he had just done. However, so far readers could not see the expression of his facial expressions, because it was covered by a shadow. Moreover, a dark aura appeared around him. After a short period of time, it became known that he was already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Large drops of sweat mixed with tears appeared on his face. Mentally, he wondered how it had happened in the first place. Ho Seoljin remembered the character he was standing in front of. Nagi at that moment asked the man to tell her his name. She was cold-blooded. This was the scene he had seen this morning. And if the main character was not mistaken, then the girl was a character from the player. The next moment, he made a guess that made him pull a smile from ear to ear. The guy asked a question out loud. He was curious whether his interlocutor was so interested in the identity of this body. Ho Seoljin crossed his arms over his chest and came to the conclusion that it was a dream. Then he asked aloud a question according to which it was like a lucid dream, although even if it wasn't, he was already nervous a lot. The main character took a couple of steps in the direction of Naga, which is why she told him in a demanding voice not to move. The story informed readers that the girl's class belonged to swordsmen. She was known for using the earth element. However, Ho Seoljin ignored her request, asking her a question in return. He wondered what she would do if he kept moving. Such an audacious remark surprised Dean, who was still watching the stranger and his rival suddenly appear from the side. As it turned out, the Naga's strength increased from the connection with the ground. At that moment, black smoke began to appear around the lower part of the girl's body, and the defeated man mentally suggested that he needed to come a little closer. The heroine, with an angry expression in her eyes, began her remark. She said that if he took another step, then this stubbornness would have to be stopped. A wall of blue flames appeared around her and the main character. The schoolboy instantly became alert, because it was so huge in size that the border of the arena ended a few meters away. The audience changed their faces at the same time, and her former rival in his head was surprised by the fact that Naga still had so much strength left that she was able to continue conjuring, making the assumption that she was never tired. He was scared. Readers could tell by the red aura that enveloped his body. Moreover, the scarecrow was this: the girl caused a true wall. Her hair was blowing in the wind, which gave her silhouette a certain mystery. Then the picture showed that the main character was about to be dealt a crushing blow any minute. After all, it was impossible to resist such a person even on his feet. Although even Ho Seoljin's face was no longer the same. Dean asked himself a question. He was wondering if the stranger was okay, who the next moment turned his head to the left side, at the same time curious about why the wind suddenly blew. In his opinion, it was refreshing. Nagi, who had fallen ill and tensed up, indicated to herself that her new opponent was not going to back down, which means, in that case, she should have accepted the challenge. She grabbed her sword, which was enveloped in blue energy, and gave a positive response. However, the guy was only alerted by such a rare action. At this very moment, Dean was mentally pondering on why Nagi pulled out her sword, and then made the assumption that she was afraid. It just seemed impossible to him, because Ho Seoljin didn't seem so strong. The next episode describes how the main character tried to cover his head with both hands to protect himself from the threat that arose, and then he exclaimed because he saw a knife. He made it clear that it was a mistake, but such strange behavior baffled Nagi. The guy closed his eyes and thought that no matter what kind of dream it was, but cold steel was too much. After a short period of time, the student forced himself not to be afraid, although he was only trying to drive this thought into himself. After all, if Ho Soljin is a loser in a dream, then how was he going to continue living at all? Aloud, the guy gave a negative answer, which only angered the rival, in whose red eyes anger appeared. The main character tried to set himself up that it was all a simple dream. He asked the girl a question, pointing out that he was not so simple. The next moment, the guy made a swinging motion and said the previous phrase again. Moreover, the student was sure that he would be able to win. He took a step, which provoked the appearance of a blue flame around his foot, a burden in ordinary slippers, and then he approached his opponent. Dean, who had been watching the stranger suddenly appear all this time, wondered, calling the main character's attack strange. And he, in turn, was already thinking that even if it wasn't all a dream, and all the actions might seem thoughtless, but all this bravado had a basis. Readers might have thought that Ho Soljin was serious. He headed in the direction of Naga, with whom he did not move at all, so he had to assume that she was not going to kill. The student mentally wondered if the girl had changed her mind. Maybe she was just scaring him, and then she wanted to keep him alive. But Ho Soljin did not know yet that from the moment the heroine pulled out the sword, the only outcome for him was a loss. Suddenly, a blue glow appeared around the character, the appearance of which took him by surprise. In an instant, it grew to several meters. The audience wondered what had just happened, when suddenly the girl called out to the commentator. She asked to name the result, which was picked up by the others in the arena. Someone explained out loud that no matter how you look, but the main character could no longer continue the fight. And the next moment Nagi was made the winner. Someone's hand rose, trying to get out of the ruins, when suddenly it was proclaimed that the continuation was to follow. A bright blue glow came from someone's smartphone. A man with blonde hair was holding a phone and was surprised that everything ended this way. After all, it was so boring, it didn't even cause any emotions. Moreover, an unknown character said out loud that it was different from what he was promised. Such an end was simply unacceptable. After this remark, a mysterious smile appeared on his face, which to some extent expressed a threat. The silhouette brought his finger closer and pressed on something. After that, Ho Soljin himself appeared to the readers. It was as if he was floating in some kind of space without consciousness. The light fell on him, and the guy himself made the assumption that he was dead. The schoolboy opened his eyes and made the assumption that this was the end. When suddenly there was a bright flash, some kind of image began to appear. The main character mentally wondered what it was. In the new episode, a silhouette of a girl with blonde hair appeared. She screamed at the top of her voice for the guy to get up. Such a movement made him alert. He cast his gaze to the side and saw a stranger. She had long hair pulled back in a braid and big yellow eyes. The girl sat in front of him and made sure with a calm tone of voice that Ho Soljin had finally woken up. That's just the system did not show her name, class, or rank. The heroine strained her eyebrows, which made her face look like a cute child. In her opinion, everything looked so stupid. And then she began to pry, so that the student uttered a word. He didn't even answer her. But when she said this phrase out loud, Ho Soljin asked her a question. He was interested in what place he was in. Suddenly, a fire appeared around his neck, which he tried to grab with both hands and remove. As it turned out, it was a girl who made it clear to the main character that she showed kindness by spying on him, who came here without asking. The stranger was outraged that the guy also dared to ask her questions, referring to the fact that he wanted to tie up the dispute. The flame increased in size, which greatly alarmed the guy. The stranger finally said that he had crossed the border and now he had to pay for it. In the next moment, she was ordered to stop. She obeyed. The fire disappeared from the main character's neck, causing him to bounce back. A new character with blonde hair appeared in front of Ho Soljin. Behind the man's back, a sword could be seen, from which flames also emanated. He pulled a smile and asked for forgiveness, referring to the fact that the girl had recently been born. It was nice to meet him. However, when the stranger called his name, the main character could not make out, because he called him incorrectly. As it turned out, his name was Aso. He was the god of this world. However, in the next episode, the girl asked the mysterious gentleman to let her go, explaining that this schoolboy was the first to start a quarrel, to which he instructed her to moderate her ardor, because he had told her before that otherwise she might completely lose her face. Then he looked at Ho Soljin and came closer. An unexpected movement on the part of the so-called god made the main character, who was watching him from below, wary. The guy, whose face was hidden by a black object, stuck his sword, which scared the schoolboy. Ho Soljin tried to hide his face and shouted at the top of his voice that he had made a mistake, and plaintively demanded that he not be beaten and spared. However, the stranger aloud made the assumption that his new acquaintance did not fully understand the whole situation, and for this simple and obvious reason he would try to explain it to him in another way. The guy asked the main character to listen to him carefully. At these words, Ho Saljin opened his eyes and looked at the outstretched hand. God turned to him and made it clear that the schoolboy was chosen to become a player in this place. The action of the next chapter develops around God, who gave his hand to the main character, and told him that he had been chosen to this place to become a player. From such a remark, the student was confused. There was a kind of horror and fear on his face. Apparently, he did not understand how to react correctly to the information received. In the next episode, the guy looked up at the mysterious character and asked him a question. As it turned out, he was interested that wasn't it just the name of a webtoon. However, the latter, in turn, asked him in response if Ho Saljin had not read carefully. It became known that there was no, because the main character was curious about what was there. God looked at him for a while and was silent in bewilderment. After a short period of time, the character started to say something, when suddenly he stopped. He raised his right hand and made a gesture as if he wanted to snap his fingers now. The man was going to show it. There was a bright flash of bright blue color. It was followed by an image of a huge tower with many small windows. The story familiarized readers with the heavenly castle called the terrarium. This design was a dream full of gold, silver, and a sweet sense of victory. Images of large chests, swords, old portraits, and, of course, jewelry appeared before the eyes of the audience, and those who wanted to climb into this castle were called players. The narrative described to its readers a muscular man with a sword hanging behind his back. There was a red headband on his head that was fluttering in the wind. The character was looking somewhere in front of him, turning his back to the audience. Then it introduced them to other mysterious heroes. Ho Saljin was still repeating the words of his interlocutor, not to the end, not believing what was happening to him now. And God continued to convince him of the truthfulness of his remarks, giving a positive answer each time. As it turned out, both Dina and Nagi, and him, too. Instantly, a sinister smile appeared on the suspicious character's face, which was only misleading. It was difficult for readers to get ahead of what he was thinking, because his eyes were hidden by a black object in the form of pixels. The main character lowered his head and asked God, making the assumption that he was now a player like the others, to which he replied, calling it pretty cool. He turned his back to Ho Saljin and placed his sword on his back, moving forward impressively. Suddenly, something made him turn around and smile slightly. As it turned out, it was a schoolboy who, out of horror and surprise, tried to understand why he was chosen. He pointed at himself and glanced at the man with blonde hair. Why was he surprised, not happy with such a reaction? He wondered why the main character didn't like it. Ho Saljin got up on both feet and approached the god, simultaneously shouting at the top of his voice, trying to understand why he needed all this, because now he will have to fight all the monsters. Moreover, he could not come to terms with the idea that someone could so easily declare such information. The student was angry at the fact that someone decided for him what he needed to do. That's just God objected to him, repeating the last phrase of his interlocutor, referring to the fact that it was the main character who made the promise. After this remark, bewilderment, or even madness, appeared on his face, because he did not understand anything at all. Suddenly, the story focused readers' attention on the comment left by Ho Saljin. It said that if his message becomes the best, then, no matter if he has a burning or some other sword there, he will cope with his opponent. Moreover, Nagi was already in the terrarium right now, so the guy first had to become at least a player. The main character grabbed his head and was surprised that this whole situation happened because of the usual comment. However, these words made God turn around and ask the student a question. The man wanted to make sure that he wrote it after thinking carefully. Dark energy formed around him. Apparently, the character was angry with his guesses. His appearance made Ho Saljin feel embarrassed and close his eyes. The next moment, God burst out laughing. In the new episode, it became known that he was just joking, but, as it might seem, this information did not make the student relax at all, because large drops of sweat were still flowing down his face. After a short period of time, the mysterious man made it clear to his anxious interlocutor that no one forced him. Moreover, he could give up right now. After this sentence, a mysterious smile appeared on his face again. There was just one but. God did not think that the guy would want to return to the real world, which greatly alarmed him. The eyes of the main character rounded to an unimaginable size. He lowered his head and remembered about reality. Images of Kim Taewon and Yoon Hee-so looking down at their classmate appeared in Ho Saljin's mind. They didn't put a schoolboy in anything. However, in the next moment, the main character had some idea. He was taken aback. At that moment, a god appeared in front of him, who squatted down and left his sword aside, asking the guy if he still wanted to return. The boy sat on the cold floor in thought. As it turned out, it became much easier for him. He turned to Mr. Aso and asked him a question. The story introduced readers to the real desire of the character. He was interested in what he would get if he rose to the first place. After such a bold remark, a mysterious smile appeared on the man's face as if he was up to something. And then he opened his mouth wide, as if he was preparing to eat it, and exclaimed that the schoolboy could take anything he wanted. God extended his hand to his interlocutor, and he shook it. In that case, he agreed. In the next episode, the story describes how a character with blonde hair stuck his large sword into the floor, lined with pink tiles. A moment later, he began his monologue by saying that now God was going to send Ho Saljin to the tower. At that moment, the guy was standing inside the yellow circle. The man added on his own that this was the only time he saved a schoolboy, because he would not be able to do it a second time. So God instructed him to be careful in a duel. The main character was listening attentively to his interlocutor when suddenly he distracted him, saying that it was time to start. However, Ho Saljin stopped him, to which he replied that he wanted to do a pretty cool thing. As it turned out, the student argued his behavior by the fact that a man with blonde hair and closed eyes was going to send him empty-handed. But God was not at all confused by this. He curled his lips into a tube and asked what was wrong. The main character called him irresponsible, referring to the fact that even novice trainers received their first Pokémon, which is why the schoolboy asked him to give him at least something. However, as it became known in the next episode, he had nothing. Suddenly there was a girl who objected to both characters that she tried to listen to them calmly, but there was something that alarmed her. The heroine appeared in front of Ho Saljin, shrouded in flames, and turned to a schoolboy who was looking at the smoke appearing under her feet. The girl was terribly angry. The reason was that the guy was talking to God as a friend. Her white hair, gathered in a long braid, stood on end. Such an aura was similar to the main character. He compared it to the one that the company from his class had. She hovered and looked down at him, crossing her arms and making a remark to the couple to behave normally. At that moment, the student hit his head on the ground and, trembling all over, gave her a positive answer. God was humbly silent all this time and watched as the heroine mocked her interlocutor, punishing him in various strange ways. And then he laughed. Why did these two turn their heads in his direction and stare in bewilderment? As it turned out, a man with closed black pixels eyes found them funny when suddenly a brilliant idea came to his head. The character has made a decision. He asked the main character a question, asking him a question according to which the guy said to give him something. The beginning of his remarks somewhat puzzled both Ho Saljin and the girl. And in the next episode, the hero made him an offer to take the interlocutor with him, pointing at her and bringing her closer to him. Apparently, none of these two were happy with this outcome of events. The first turned to Mr. Aso, adding from herself that she did not want to, because God told her to come down to earth with a guy she disliked. The next moment, Ho Saljin entered the dialogue, who also did not want to go with the heroine, whom he considered crazy. However, the man tried to calm them down, referring to the fact that he had already firmly decided what he was going to do. With one wave of his left hand, God sent a girl with white hair into the yellow circle. She stepped on it, and Mr. Aso twisted a satisfied smile and wished them a good time. Finally, in the next episode, readers were able to find out the name of an attractive heroine. It became known that her name was Excalibur. And no matter what anyone says, she was a sword made by God himself. For this simple and obvious reason, the girl will be useful to Ho Saljin. A blue glow appeared around the heroes, which made them worry even more. Excalibur called out to Mr. Aso, to which he replied that when they returned, they would have ice cream. As it turned out, the girl didn't even know what it was. Something similar to lightning appeared in space, which raised huge clouds of smoke and dust after itself. In the next episode, a certain silhouette began to clear his throat. After a short period of time, it turned out that it was Ho Saljin, who mentally exclaimed with a dissatisfied tone of an inner voice that this lightning had appeared again, objecting that there really was no other way to move. Suddenly the main character remembered Excalibur. He looked in front of him and made the assumption that the girl with the strange name was there. The next moment, the heroine looked at her hands. However, readers could not see her expression, for the reason that it was hidden by the shadow of her long bangs. Suddenly, the heroine grabbed her white hair and, overcoming crying, gave up shouting at the top of her voice, expressing with all her appearance that she was angry. The man made sure for himself that his new friend had decreased to some extent, so he addressed her aloud, calling her a child. which made her angrier. She fiercely threw questions at the student, according to which he deliberately pretended not to know her. Moreover, she blamed him for everything that happened. And, apparently, to let off steam, Excalibur hit Ho Saljin so hard that he flew away. At this very moment, Mr. Aso was watching them, holding his chin with his right hand. As it turned out, the man forgot to tell them something. The story describes to readers how one of the characters asked the other what kind of place it was. The second made the assumption that someone lived in the dilapidated head. And God continued his remark by saying that without the trials it would have been quite boring. A sinister smile appeared on his face. It became clear that he had prepared a training quest for them. Suddenly, a huge silhouette of a man appeared behind Excalibur, who was dressed in many skins of different colors and sizes. The girl did not notice him and asked her interlocutor a question, asking if he thought it was important, referring to the fact that she was small and fragile. But with his whole appearance, Ho Saljin showed that something was alarming him. The heroine was curious why he did not answer her, adding that his reaction was due to the fact that she scared him. Only readers could notice how the stranger raised his hand, clenching it into a fist. The main character rushed in the direction of his partner, at the same time shouting at the top of his voice to be careful, when Excalibur's body suddenly appeared in the air, spinning and thus raising gusts of wind. She noticed the threat and managed to turn away from the blow, but the stranger continued to advance, rapidly moving in her direction. The girl used her fists to slow down her opponent and weaken him to some extent. However, the next episode describes that she was hit in the neck, which caused the heroine to clench her jaw, making a grin and moaning in pain. The stranger, who had a red hide on his head, also used his fists. They came together in a duel, the power of which was so strong that both rivals broke the ground under them. When the girl was next to him, he asked if she was okay, to which she replied that she did not notice how he appeared. Ho Saljin turned to the stranger after a short period of time, asking him a question. He was interested in who he was and for what reason he attacked, because in fact the characters did nothing to him. Suddenly, the main character and Excalibur were surrounded by a group of people who also wore a red skin. The man replied that they should have asked them this question. The story informed readers that the characters met with a guild of robbers called Red Hoods. Moreover, they were at her base. The player Red Wolf, belonging to the monk class, made it clear to the uninvited guests that they would pay for breaking into this place. Ho Saljin's eyes widened to an unimaginable size. He was very scared because large drops of cold sweat began to appear on his face. But the same could not be said about his partner, because she was serious. A red silhouette appeared behind them. The man gave orders to grab the girl first. Suddenly, the figures of the guild members appeared in the air, which forced Excalibur to prepare for an attack. As it turned out, this was the reason why she did not like the earth. When the main character asked her what they needed to do, the girl asked him to be quiet. When suddenly she exclaimed to Ho Saljin to hold tight. However, he did not understand what exactly. Suddenly, a fiery glow appeared in the air, which in a second took the form of a sword. One of the guild members asked, apparently, the leader what was wrong with this heroine, and he, in turn, made the assumption that it looked like a weapon. The main character exclaimed that now he would be able to win. However, something caused the Red Wolf to attract his attention, and Mr. Aso just laughed at that moment. As it turned out, the thing was that the edged weapon was broken. Now the main character was not sure of victory. The story continues its fascinating narrative, according to which it became known to readers that Excalibur was the sword of the ego, a cold weapon that had a soul, something that grew stronger with its master, a legendary sword with unlimited possibilities. A silhouette of a girl with long hair appeared before the eyes of the audience, who stood behind a huge number of different cold weapons. It only became known from the words of Mr. Aso that this did not mean that he had now become as weak as his current master. The story once again focused readers' attention on the main character, who was trembling all over. The reason was that he had Excalibur in his hands, only broken. The narration presented a student's card, according to which his name was Ho Saljin. He belonged to the class of students and the rank of a beginner. At this moment, the guy fell into prostration, because it will be difficult for him. As it turned out, Excalibur herself wasn't expecting such a setup either, because she howled, wondering what had happened. Moreover, the sword also had a business card stating that its class was called Ego Sword and the rank was beginner. The girl's eyes widened to an unimaginable size. Large drops of sweat began to flow down her face, and the heroine herself shrank and spoke aloud with a successful and frightened expression of facial expressions that she could not believe that she had become so insignificant. In her opinion, everything was over, and for this reason Excalibur wanted to get home with every fiber of her soul. She approached the stone wall and leaned her head on it. and the main character, in turn, was somewhat discouraged by such strange behavior of his new friend. He approached her and asked her a question. He was interested in what they would do now. However, the heroine wanted to be alone, so she answered him with a menacing tone of voice so that the guy would not touch her once again. Suddenly, the story focuses on the Red Wolf. The man's face might have seemed stern. He suddenly found himself behind the main characters and said out loud that the situation seemed stupid to him. The first remark made the student turn around and tense up, because a mysterious dark aura formed around the guild member, which was somewhat frightening. In the next episode, it became known that the man felt some interest in what his opponents were, but then he came to the conclusion in the affirmative that they were not strong. And in this case, they had to pay for sneaking into the territory of the Red Hoods. His words made the main character scream in horror. He didn't understand what was going on. A nightmare froze on his face, and then the narrative began to describe the members of this very guild. The first man who allowed made Excalibur and Ho Saljan understand that they would not even think of running away was of a large build. His body was covered with a white shirt, over which there was a red vest. In this color, a bandana was hanging on his head. The second guy was blonde and had a sharp nose and chin. He pulled a sinister smile and said he would take care of their eyes. At this moment, the main character turned completely red from the pressure from dangerous characters and the evil aura, which had a close energy. Tears were already welling up in his eyes, and in his head, the schoolboy concluded that the people standing in front of him were real psychopaths. Only he understood that he had to get out of that place by all means. He closed his eyes and began to think. It was only in the next episode that Excalibur attracted his attention, whose face readers could not yet see. But, apparently, she was serious about something. It could be understood by her confident gait. The main character turned his head at her over his right shoulder and called out, trying to figure out what his friend was up to. The girl turned to the Red Hoods. She was angry because flames appeared around her hair. As it turned out, her entire body was shrouded in fire. Excalibur raised her right hand up and pointed with her thumb somewhere behind her back. She was asked a question by her opponent. Readers became aware that the girl was interested in why the men from the guild put her on the same level with this loser. It was about the main character. Readers could notice how irritable she was because the vessels on her forehead became clearly visible. The next moment, the Red Hoods trembled with fear. One of them was surprised that the girl had such a powerful force that they felt. His friend picked up the drooping and wary mood and said that it was hard for them to even just stand. For this simple and obvious reason, the bandits made the assumption that the heroine was a rancor. Suddenly, the story focuses readers' attention on God, who pulled a smile from ear to ear and said aloud, cursing slightly. As it turned out, he was unhappy because Excalibur managed to retain his power after all. The heroine raised her right hand and pointed it at her rivals, wishing that they finally lost and got what they deserved. A bright yellow light formed around her, and the next moment it grew to a huge size, taking the form of an explosion or a burst of magic. Such a strong push provoked the appearance of a strong wind flow, which raised high clouds of smoke and dust. Every member of the guild was wary, because they could not have imagined that Excalibur was capable of something like this. A man with a red skin on his head entered into the dialogue. He asked what was happening now, referring to the fact that he had never seen such outstanding abilities. One of his comrades turned to the commander and replied that now was not the right time to admire unfamiliar magic, because they had to escape. This guy was literally shouting at the top of his voice because it was hard to hear him because of the wind. That's just, in the opinion of the girl herself, it was too late. She burst into an evil laugh and bared her snow-white teeth. And at this moment, the main character turned his back on her, at the same time often casting a glance at his friend. Readers could make a bold assumption that the schoolboy was going to run away. But Mr. Aso didn't like it. He said out loud his thoughts, according to which he could not allow this. The mysterious character pulled a sinister smile from ear to ear, thinking of something. In the next episode, a small tongue of flame appeared next to Excalibur's hand, which suddenly disappeared. From the expression on the girl's face, it was clear that she clearly had not planned this. She began to try to use her fire power with renewed vigor, at the same time shouting at the top of her voice with anger that this should not have happened. The Red Wolf, who had been watching his rival for some time, began to follow her hopeless situation with bewilderment. When suddenly the heroine stopped. She looked away from her big yellow eyes and threw her right hand behind her head in a gesture as if she was uncomfortable. An aura formed around her that had an embarrassing look. However, the man couldn't take it anymore. He crossed his muscular arms over his chest and gave the order to the members of his guild that they began to destroy. And those, in turn, gave a unanimous positive answer and quickly rushed towards Excalibur and Ho Saljan, who, by the way, has not been seen for a long time. The wind rose around the captain from the fast speed of the fighters. As it became known in the next episode, the main character has been moving away from danger all this time. The story described how I watched the upcoming battle from the side. According to his thoughts, the student asked a question. He wondered if his friend could not use her power because he intended to disappear from the Stanishnaya field under the guise. That's just Ho Saljin made a firm decision that he could not leave the girl and just go alone. However, the guy did not finish the next remark. The story described how his eyes widened in horror. Apparently, the main character was scared of something. In the next episode, the narration focused readers' attention on a man with a red skin on his head. There was an ominous aura around him, but so far his face was hard to see, as if it expressed nothing. When suddenly the picture showed his eyes in close-up. There was an intimidating red color burning in them. The mysterious character strained his eyebrows, which made his wrinkles clearly visible. They gave him extra age. He looked like a predator that was preparing to hunt its prey. Such a strange reaction alerted Ho Saljin. He raised his head, which was wet with sudden sweat, and his eyes widened with panic, because he had not managed to escape. Suddenly, the action shifts to the main character, towards which a group of bandits was heading. The guild members shot up and seemed to freeze in the air, thus flying towards their rival. One of them shouted, so that Excalibur would definitely hear, that she was shaking with fear. That's just the girl turned her head over her right shoulder and came to the conclusion out loud that there was nothing left for them. She called out to Ho Saljin, asking him to take on one or even two bandits. However, the heroine did not finish, because she did not find the silhouette of the guy behind her, deciding that he was missing. Why, a quiet horror froze on her face. She screamed at the top of her voice, hoping that her partner would respond. The girl was terribly angry and annoyed. It could be understood by the way she cursed Ho Saljin, who at that very moment, for some reason, was running through a grove full of tall trees and lush green bushes. According to his thoughts, it became known to readers that the guy made the assumption that someone could consider him stupid. Moreover, he definitely did not make plans to fight them, for the simple and obvious reason that he would not count his bones. The student greedily gulped air to restore heavy breathing, when suddenly, a suspicion suddenly appeared in his head that it was too quiet. He thought that something might have happened. Ho Saljin stared in front of him, trying to focus his vision, and suddenly decided that Excalibur could have been captured by guild members. That's just the main character doubted. He tried to set himself up for positive thoughts, saying to himself that the girl was strong, and therefore he could not worry and think about useless things. Moreover, it seemed to him that once he got into this mysterious world, something had to change in his life. The schoolboy clenched his jaws and thus opened a view of his grin. Then he closed his eyes and came to the conclusion that the guy's presence would only interfere with the girl. But nothing has changed in his life. Suddenly, Ho Saljin tripped over a rock. Apparently, he did not notice him due to the fact that he was immersed in his thoughts. The weather was nice. The sun was shining outside, focusing on the edge of the forest. The main character called himself a weakling, in the end, and the reason was that he allowed himself to run away and leave his friend alone in trouble. The schoolboy was lying face down on some dirty path. In the next episode, the guy stood up slightly, leaning on both hands. Readers may have noticed involuntary movements of his body. As it turned out, Ho Saljin was shaking. For some time he was silent and looked down in front of him, so the audience could not see the expression on his face. Then the main character bent down slightly and suddenly said, summing up that there was nothing to be done now. He asked himself a question. He was interested in whether an ordinary schoolboy could do something, when suddenly he gave himself an answer that was negative. Suddenly, images surfaced in his head in which he was hiding from his classmates, lowering his gaze and resigned to his position. There was a red aura around him that had a somewhat intimidating appearance. Ho Saljin sat on his knees and made a firm decision that it would be better this way. Only the next moment he was interrupted. Someone asked him a question, according to which the guy ran away, and not for the first time. This phrase made the student wake up as if after a long sleep. His eyes widened in surprise. The mysterious silhouette called the guy pathetic, which made his expression look drooping, and he decided something. In the new episode, the story focuses readers' attention on the head, which towered to the very heavens, and then to Excalibur. The girl's face was completely covered in abrasions and bruises. According to someone's words, the heroine is already so tired. Moreover, it seemed to this audacious character that such a pretentious and self-confident girl would be able to give something worthy. It was a man with a red hide on his head. He raised his left arm, showing his biceps, and said that his opponent was just weak. Excalibur was sitting on the cold ground, holding onto her legs. There were huge clouds of smoke and dust around both characters. Apparently, the battle was fierce. That's just the heroine wasn't scared at all. She strained her eyebrows and looked at the speaker with a smug expression on her face and objected that he had no right to say such words to her for the simple and obvious reason that all his guild members did for him. In her head, the confident girl exclaimed that she was annoyed by this behavior. The Red Wolf, in turn, pulled a victorious grin from ear to ear and summed it up, saying that he felt some pity that the life of such a baby could suddenly end. The character made a swinging motion using only his fist. At that moment, Excalibur was worried that she couldn't use her power because everything could turn in her favor, when suddenly the main character suddenly appeared in front of her, which greatly puzzled the guild commander, who was still preparing to deliver a crushing blow. The man exclaimed as if he was angered by the fact that another opponent had appeared. But the girl was more puzzled. Her eyes widened, and her eyebrows were directed. Her mouth opened in silent horror. In the next episode, there was a jolt and an explosion of energy, among which readers could only see the silhouette of a red wolf. And then the story showed the expression of his touchy face in close-up, which after a short period of time was directed at the main characters. Ho-Solgen covered Excalibur with his body, which at that time was trying to get out of his grip, shouting at the top of his voice about why he had returned, referring to the terrible fact that he was always running like the last loser. The enraged girl was firmly convinced that she would be able to cope without his help. However, all he answered was a question according to which the guy wanted to know why it was impossible to be a loser. Readers in the next episode saw tears on his face. The heroine was taken by surprise by such a reaction. She watched the student and was silent, when suddenly the girl exhaled and pushed him away. Aloud she made it clear to him that it was not prohibited by law. The guy looked at her and began to wipe away the tears that flowed down his dirty face. Excalibur then held out her hand to him, indicating that he should hold on to it. It became known to the audience that she made an offer to Ho-Solgen to try again. The expression on her face expressed the desire to win. The story focused on the main character, on whose cheek the last tear flowed. Suddenly he smiled and gave a positive response, shaking hands with his girlfriend. That's why both she and Mr. Iso were inspired. The latter made it clear that they had passed the test. A huge column of flame appeared in the air, apparently heading towards the Red Wolf. The man raised his head and began to follow the mysterious phenomenon, wondering what kind of power it was. In his opinion, it was impossible to become the first rank, like Nagi, although even a little higher. A small charge, similar to an electric one, appeared around Ho-Solgen's body. As it turned out, he was summoned by the sword. This time it looked like a full-fledged one. There was a bright aura of yellow and blue colors around him. The story told about how a schoolboy was going to climb to the top, and the only one who needed to be defeated was himself. The story continues its rapid development. She begins the description of the new chapter with Excalibur, around which energy was formed in the form of blurred lines of orange and yellow colors that seemed to float through space. The girl put her eponymous hand to the right side and looked at her with a dubious expression on her face. As it became known, she gave only half of her strength. Then the picture turned its attention to the main character, who, in her opinion, made a sudden decision to take away all the remaining magic of God in her. The student held a sword with both hands, on the blade of which small flames played. Ho-Solgen seemed to be in prostration. The shadow of his long bangs hid his eyes a little, but the audience could still see them and compare them as with glass. Aloud, the guy exclaimed that it was time to start. In front of the main character were the frightened silhouettes of the guild members. Apparently, the reason for their fear was that the guy's figure was literally shrouded in fire, which continued to grow. One of the red wolves turned to the other with a worried expression on his face and asked him to come out first, arguing that the man was huge, and therefore how could he hide from behind? The same character, in turn, opened his mouth and silently watched the speaker, because he did not understand how to react correctly to this remark. However, they were interrupted by a stern voice. It was the commander around whom the dark energy connected with anger and neglect gathered. In a demanding tone of voice, he gave the order for his comrades to leave, because he wanted to deal with Ho-Solgen himself. Readers could trace how, after some madness, this hero's vessels on his muscular arms became more emphasized, which gave him a more intimidating appearance. The man strained his limbs and asked a question to the guild members who were standing behind him. He wanted to make it clear who he hated the most. As it turned out, the answer was simple: those who only know how to rely on their trinkets. Actually, this was the reason why he created his guild of thieves. The picture showed a close-up of a nervous and stern commander, who was also burning with a bright flame. However, the main character, who was in question, did not mentally understand what his opponent was talking about. When the blinding glow disappeared, the man raised his head and, releasing steam from his mouth, forced Ho Seoljan to watch how to use his power. Suddenly the earth trembled, and the next moment it began to burst at all, as if a mysterious character provoked the occurrence of an earthquake. Then a huge earthen boulder rose into the air. The guild members admired their commanders, who, according to them, was always confident in his words. However, the speaker was interrupted because he was only getting in the way. The Red Wolf continued his monologue with the fact that no matter the ego sword, or a simple knife, as he called it, if the student can't get closer, then there will be no use from him anyway. The huge earthen structure rose on the fragile, in comparison with him, figure of the main character, blocking his sunlight. Readers could notice for themselves that small charges, similar to electric ones, were darting around Ho Seoljan. In the next episode, the embittered guild commander shouted at the top of his voice, wishing that the schoolboy could not cope with the stone and lost the fight. But regarding his precious sword, he was going to sell it. When the boulder got as close as possible to the main character, who continued to stand motionless, apparently considering a plan of action, then he suddenly got into an attacking pose and pulled Excalibur aside. His dark eyes were blank, as if it wasn't Ho Seoljan, who had fled the battlefield some time ago like the last coward. Such a mysterious reaction surprised the Red Wolf, but he did not stop his attack. The stone hit the ground with a powerful jolt. The pressure was so strong that the earth flew into the air. That's just something went wrong with the Red Wolf's plan. The place where the boulder landed exploded. Such an unexpected action caused all the guild members to stand in a stupor, and the commander even asked the question out loud, trying to make sure that his eyes did not let the man down. It was as if a current passed behind him, followed by blue energy, and then they darted into the air. The red waves were stroked by a wave of flame, which lifted them into space like ants at a rapid speed. The flow of fire provoked the emergence of a strong wind that moved dust and earth. Why, there was real chaos everywhere. The guild members couldn't even open their eyes due to the powerful pressure, let alone use their magic to counterattack or even defend. Through the dust, readers could see the silhouette of the main character. The guy lowered his head and bent his back, simultaneously holding Excalibur with both hands, absorbed by the flames. Ho Seoljan looked in front of him and summed up aloud in a tired tone of voice that he had managed to do it. He staggered to his left side and fell. A close-up of the story described how in front of the main character, lying on his stomach, legs spread out, the earth seemed to split. Apparently, the schoolboy's blow was so strong that he touched the foundation, leaving a small depression inside which the opponents were. The Thieves' Guild, the Red Hoods, has been eliminated. They lay motionless on the cold ground, not making a sound. And the story informed readers that Ho Seoljan now truly began to belong to the class of students in the rank of a beginner. In the next episode, someone was heard laughing. After a short period of time, it became known that it was Mr. Aso. He was lying on a green sofa with huge pillows and held a phone in his right hand, the light from which shone brightly into his eyes, which, unfortunately, were hidden by black pixels. He put his left hand behind his head, supporting it and making the pose more comfortable. Aloud, the man exclaimed joyfully that the situation, or rather the spectacle that happened on his initiative, proceeded perfectly. In his opinion, it has become more interesting to observe. He pulled a smile from ear to ear and suddenly threw his smartphone somewhere behind his back. God took a deep breath and crossed his legs. A shadow enveloped his expression, causing it to take on a somewhat fierce appearance. The man said out loud his thoughts, according to which now all the candidates were finally collected. In the next episode, Mr. Aso lifted his body from the pillow, putting his weight on his legs, and folded his hands, with which he held his head with blonde hair. Readers could notice how there was a chessboard in front of him, on which 2 red game pieces and another blue one were visible. The man was glad of the mysterious fact that it would start its course, as it became known thanks to the following phrase. He was talking about time and the world he created. That's just where the picture ended. She showed readers a clear sky with white clouds, and in the next episode, the story describes how some kind of cart was moving, using a very fluffy animal as a force. As it turned out, his name was Makiko, and his main feature was the fact that he was cute. Then readers focused their attention on the frail male hands that held the reins. After a short period of time, it became known that it was Willius too, who was 86 years old. And he also worked as a cab driver. The character looked quite old, and, apparently, that's why it was very noticeable how his head was shaking. There was a crisis in his quiet life. The reason for this arose literally 30 minutes ago. As the narration tells, he was combing Makiko and at the same time was about to return, when suddenly something interrupted him. Before the eyes of readers appeared a picture in which a man stood next to a huge animal, probably because of the lush and curly hair, holding a wooden comb in his right hand. A stranger asked his grandfather to give him a ride. When the old man turned over his right shoulder, he asked an ill-mannered man a question with an angry tone of voice, referring to the fact that he had his grandfather. The man frowned at his thick gray hair and menacingly watched the interlocutor, and then his face instantly changed. As it turned out, it was Excalibur, on whose head you could see the skin of a red monster that looked like a wolf. These were worn by guild members. The girl was pulling with her left hand the main character, who was unconscious, and with her right hand a large bundle of necessary, in her opinion, things. The next moment, without thinking twice, she gave a negative answer and cast a tired look at the old man. When the heroine got even closer to him, she asked him a question. She wondered if it was impossible to make a request without having a grandfather. Readers could trace how her appearance, and although, perhaps, her appearance puzzled the man, because he moved away from her, leaning his back on Mikiko, who was just watching Excalibur questioningly. However, Grandpa waved both hands and gave her a negative answer, adding from himself that he didn't have either. And in his mind, he wondered if Ho Soljin was a corpse. In the next episode, the main characters appeared in real time. Someone called out to the girl, making him nervous. Readers could tell by the frightened expression on his face, which began to drip drops of sweat. It was a girl who was sitting with her back to him and turned her head in his direction over her left shoulder. She asked him why they were moving so slowly. At the very end of the cart was sitting with his head hanging down, although Soljin, who was still unconscious. The old man did not even turn to her, despite the fact that his interlocutor menacingly knocked on the wooden wall and apologized. He was holding the reins when suddenly an eerily red aura formed around him. The man took a cursory glance at the heroine and mentally cursed her because he could not object to her, although he imagined that he could do it if he was 50 years younger. Excalibur at this moment approached her companion and tried to bring him to his senses. She grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and he suddenly tilted his head involuntarily, which alerted the old man and left the girl confused. When the man turned his head and returned his gaze to the road, he heard strange sounds, according to which the heroine decided that something was broken. In his head, he came to the conclusion that it would be better if he did not interfere. In the next episode, the story describes how Excalibur closely followed the main character. He was lying motionless on the hay with his mouth open, which caused saliva to flow down his cheek. The girl concluded out loud that something had not even moved since he lost consciousness. Then she turned his head, like a child who was touching and learning new things, and wondered if Ho Soljin had died. It wasn't that she didn't care about his physical and moral condition, but she was worried about what would become of her. She asked someone if Mr. Iso would pick her up in that case. Suddenly, the main character jumped up, scaring his friend. She didn't expect such a sudden movement, so her hand reflexively hit Ho Soljin in one piece. The situation was funny for the simple and obvious reason that the student, when he woke up, said out loud the words about fried rice with squid. Actually, that's why he was drooling. After a short period of time, the story described how a bump grew on the guy's head, and the girl asked him a question, according to which he did not remember anything. And he, in turn, grabbed his head and replied that nothing had happened since he took it in his hands. Excalibur thought he would be of some use. However, as it turned out, he remembered that something cool had happened. That's just the heroine decided that there was no sense in this, because the schoolboy forgot everything. He lowered his head and asked for forgiveness. The story showed a close-up of the expression on the face of a girl who made a bold assumption in her head that it was all an accident. However, in her opinion, this could not be true, because it could not be used simply because of luck. She looked at Ho Soljin, who was talking to the old man and admiring Mikiko. Excalibur decided that maybe her new boyfriend looked weak and stupid, but at that moment he did not kill any of the enemies. She remembered how the guild members were lying, exhausted and immobilized. While the guy was drooling, the girl came to the conclusion that the student managed to fully control the power of God. When suddenly the main character exclaimed at the top of his voice that he remembered something, so he managed to attract the attention of his partner, who opened her mouth and tried to make sure whether it was true or not. But, in his opinion, it was not so important. However, the girl approached him and asked him not to pull, because anything could help them. As it turned out, the moment Excalibur held out her hand to him, the student felt that she believed in him, so he thanked her. The girl was slightly surprised by this. Her eyes widened. Suddenly, Ho Soljin began to behave strangely. Apparently, the guy was trying to remember the name of the heroine, who the next moment screamed that he couldn't even learn it. The student argued that it was very negatively unusual. The old man listened to them and mentally stressed to himself that the children were very noisy. He wanted to return to the village as soon as possible. Excalibur was hitting the main character at this moment, cursing furiously and noting that this name of Ho Soljan was strange, and he grouped himself and told her that his mother gave it to him. Suddenly, something caught the guy's attention. He asked the girl to look somewhere to the side, why she gave him an order to be silent, because she had not yet taught him to close his mouth in time. However, that wasn't what he was talking about right now. The heroine turned her head and saw the city, in the distance of which there was a huge building with a sharp roof like spikes. It was a village at the entrance to the tower, at which there were guards. Ho Soljan looked at the phone and pen and mentally thought that these were all the things he came into the world with. He grabbed his head and decided that he should have found a side job. But the girl put on a red skin. As it turned out, she stole it all into thieves. The main character opened a bag of gold and exclaimed joyfully that now they didn't have to worry about money, calling the girl a good girl, to which she simply refused. She stood up and made it clear to the interlocutor that he should listen to her more often, to which he agreed. The girl offered to have a snack, but she was interrupted. The old man ordered the guards to seize his passengers. He shouted that the two men had threatened him. Excalibur objected, and the guy seemed to believe, and in the next episode he even called himself a victim. The man from the guard watched them in silence, and later made it clear to them that they were not pretending, because they knew that they were at the same time. And the proof was that the man assumed that the main characters were from the Guild of Red Hoods. Excalibur got angry at Grandpa, and Ho Soljan, dressed in a red skin, replied that they were not related to them, but only their cloaks were similar. The guard didn't believe them. The next moment they were surrounded. Someone was watching the whole spectacle from some high point. This silhouette wanted to see how events would develop.